The other night, I was driving in the center lane of a 3-lane city street when all of a sudden, a car comes into my right blind spot and almost slams right into me. I look over and I see the car swerving in and out of the lane, braking abruptly. I honk and I look over to see if the driver is possibly distracted, and I see that the man is drinking something out of a brown bottle. The man then drives up to my side and is screaming at the top of his lungs. No longer wanting to get involved with this person, I then make a lane change to the leftmost lane to try to get away from this car. I can still hear him screaming though, so I turn on my rear view camera and I see the man swerve across 2 lanes from the rightmost lane just to get behind me. He then starts speeding up as if he's trying to ram into me from behind. Once I see that he's inches from my bumper, I decide to run the red light that I'm now stopped at and make a right turn in front of the 2 lanes of traffic beside me in the hopes that, at this point, he'll just leave me alone. I look at my rearview camera once again and I see that this man is now following me, yet again trying to hit me from behind. I panic and I speed off on a side street, but when I look back, he's not letting up. He's swerving in and out of the lanes behind me and doing his best to keep up. Off in the distance in front of me, I see a freeway on-ramp, so I speed over in hope of losing him on the freeway. The on-ramp has 2 lanes that then merge into one. I pass a car prior to the merge, thinking that that car will create a natural buffer between me and the man chasing me. When I look back into the camera, I see that the man is now driving on the shoulder, near the brush on the side of the ramp in order to pass the other car and catch up to me. At this point, I'm driving close to 100 miles an hour, literally scared for my life. So I slow down just a touch and dial 911. I explain the situation to the dispatcher as best as I can, and she recommends that I try to get away to safety. Of course, that's what I'm already doing. But as this is all transpiring, the man catches up to me and begins coming up to the side of me on the freeway. He repeatedly tries to swerve into me as if to ram me or run me off the road. I slow down, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he'll pass me up, but he slows his car down too. This is when I first notice someone that I think to be his wife in the passenger seat, as she tries to chuck a bottle at my car. As it smashes into my windshield, I momentarily lose visibility, as my car is now covered in a brown, foamy fluid. I think to myself, surely this is the extent of his road rage. And I look over and it seems as if he's continuing on the freeway. Ready to get away, I then pull off on the next freeway exit, thinking that I can just leave the situation. As I do this though, the man sees me and makes a 4-lane change onto the exit ramp, again trying to ram me. And then I'm forced to speed through the city streets, and I finally end up at a red light trapped next to him. I look over at the man because there's no ignoring the situation as it stands. He's screaming at me. "Why the f did you honk at me, you bitch? You're trying to make me look like a bad father in front of my kids? You want to go, bitch?" His wife is now also yelling at me, saying, "Why would you honk at him in front of our kids?" I look into the back seat and I see 2 children in car seats. Since I'm on speaker with the dispatcher, she hears all of this and tells me to just try and get away. At this point, I'm done. There's nothing I can do and I just want to get away from him. So I make a U-turn to head back on the freeway. He follows me yet again, almost hitting a construction barrier to do so. He's back on the hunt and is trying to hit me from behind. Once I get onto the overpass to get on the freeway, I glance at him to the side of me and I see he's holding something up in my direction. Suddenly, I hear a very loud. In that moment, the dispatcher on the phone screams, "What was that? Are you okay?" Thinking that I've been shot, I start screaming, "He's shooting at me! He's shooting!" Realizing that running away isn't working, I stop and the man speeds off. Luckily, there's no broken glass and I'm not injured in any way. The dispatcher then tells me to pull off to a nearby safe location, so I head to the parking lot of a nearby mall. I tell the dispatcher the make, color, and model of the car, as well as a partial license plate. The whole time I drive there, I'm concerned that the man could be following me again. I mean, after all, there were plenty of natural breaks in our chase, and he resumed every time. but they sent an officer over to file a police report. While I'm waiting for the officer, I realize that my car's cameras are always recording, so I hit the save button. The officer comes over and I tell him my story, describing everything that I can in detail. I also tell him that I may also have footage of the whole thing. We take a walk around my car, and for the most part, there's no damage. The officer then informs me that because I'm not injured and because there's no damage to the car, there really isn't anything that can be done. I ask him if it was an assault. He says because the bottle hit my car and not me, that it wasn't. I ask him if it's reckless driving. He says that out here in California, reckless driving is a misdemeanor, and one that requires the presence of a CHP officer in order to even intervene. I then ask him if it could be considered attempted murder because he was trying to ram into me. But he says that this is just plain old road rage, and there's not much that can be done. At most, the officer says that once he has a complete license plate, an officer can go out and talk to the man. I ask him if the potential footage could be helpful in getting this man reprimanded in some way, and he tells me to only send him the highlights and necessary screenshots, though he doesn't think anything can be done. At the end of all of this, I'm extremely shaken up. I eventually make my way home and review the footage captured by my car. Luckily, I do have the entire thing recorded. The moment he almost hits me, his wife throwing the bottle at me, his face as he's yelling, his license plate, even him trying to repeatedly ram into me, it's all recorded. A few days later, the officer calls me and confirms the license plate that I have in the video, with a recording that he has from the freeway on and off ramps. A week and a half has passed since then, and there's been no update. While I understand the law is the law, it's unacceptable to me that this man could be so overtly aggressive on the road, threatening my life, the lives of his own children, and the lives of everyone else on the road with no sort of punishment. I was genuinely scared for my life, and in the process both he and I endangered the others on the road. Ultimately, this has left me feeling very disappointed with the system. An act of violence was committed, and due to technicalities, the other driver just gets off. I'm trying to keep my retelling as factual as possible, but this was a really terrifying experience. Even in the past few days, I still feel a bit hesitant about doing normal things on the road. Passing people in the left lane, changing lanes, and I'm definitely not comfortable honking at this point. I really wish I could say that this didn't get to me, but it has. One odd detail is that the man was taking pictures of my car before the bang happened. What would he possibly want that for? I'm here to ask, has anyone else been in a situation like this? Is there truly nothing that can be done? Any recommendations for how I can at least have someone check on those kids? Like I said, I have full footage of everything. The only thing I'm lacking are answers. So it's taken me a while to decide to write all of this down because this story has multiple parts that may or may not be connected. It might be a long one, and it's a little anticlimactic as it's not as creepy or traumatic as some other stories. But it's taken weeks for me to get a good night's sleep since Ronald Simmons came banging on my door. Here's the setup. I live on a little dirt road in southern Ohio, which sounds rural and farmy, but it sits right up against a complex of subsidized apartments and a major thoroughfare for the area. It's this weird mix of transients and longtime residents, young families and lone elderly people. One house might be meticulously kept and maintained, but then the neighbor might have a jet ski in the yard and a tree wrapped in chicken wire as a makeshift cage for their pet parrot. That's not a random example. It's a real thing here. I've lived here for nearly 10 years, and for more than 9 of those years, it's been just my daughter and I. She's 10 now, but I still don't like to let her play in the yard alone. And I'm obsessive about keeping our doors closed and deadbolted at all times, even when we're just chilling at home. I keep to myself and don't ask questions or cause any problems. I'm an introvert whose primary goal in life is to leave and be left alone. Then Tom moved in. So imagine that the neighborhood is kind of laid out like a 4-rung ladder. I live on the 3rd rung, and going left or right takes you to a road that leads to the aforementioned main thoroughfare and exits the neighborhood. Tom moved into a house near one of those exit roads, just a few houses down from me, on the opposite side of the street, which I was wholly unaware of until I was out in my yard one day a few years back, and a passing car slowed and the window rolled down. Now, I've had sketchy experiences with scammers and solicitors in the neighborhood before. There's a whole other story about a group that tried to convince me to get in the car and take money out of an ATM for them. So now I'm highly skeptical and suspicious of any strangers that want to just stop for a chat. Plus, I've never seen this guy before. He's heavy-set, salt and pepper hair, heavy-lidded eyes, probably in his 50s at least. I was 26 at the time, so he had to be around twice my age. So Tom slows the car down, rolls the passenger window down. He says something, but I can't hear him, so I take a hesitant step closer to the vehicle, hoping that maybe he's just asking for directions. "Hey girl," he says, and all my hackles immediately go up at the positively greasy way that he says the word girl. I'm Tom. Just moved in down the street there. "Oh, okay. What's your name, honey?" Now, calling me honey is usually a great way to royally piss me off. But there's something about him, even in those first few moments, that set off alarm bells. Sometimes it's not a big deal to tell a creep to f*** off. But other times, there's a voice that goes, "This one is a time bomb. Do not set him off." So I tell him my name in the hope that he's just being neighborly because, hey, maybe he's a nice grandpa who hasn't gotten the memo about using girl and honey. It's Southern Appalachia. He wouldn't be the only one. But then, here it comes. "You got a boyfriend?" I think every woman probably has that little, oh God moment every time this question gets asked by a rando. And I'm so taken aback and still trying to figure out the interaction that I just say something in the negative. Because it's true. I don't have a boyfriend. For a good reason, actually. I'm gay. But at this point in my life, that's still very private information, and I don't feel obligated or inclined to provide that detail to him. "You should let me take you out sometime," he says with that Appalachian twang. "We can have a few beers." At this point, all of my skin is crawling, and I decline as politely as I can. He persists though, and the interaction feels like it takes a lifetime, but I'm guessing it's only 10 to 15 minutes before I successfully inch my way back to my front door, making some excuse to go back inside. I was hoping that would be the last time I would have to talk to Tom, but of course it wasn't. For weeks, it seemed like every time I stepped outside, there was Tom in his car, slowing down to talk to me about this or that, but mostly trying to convince me to go out with him. "When are we going to go out to dinner? You going to let me buy you those drinks?" I always said no, as politely as I could. It was annoying and stressful, but manageable. Then things escalated. I'm sitting at home one day and there's a knock at my front door. I don't have a peephole or any means of knowing who's at it without sticking my whole damn head into the front window. So mostly, I just don't answer the door unless I'm expecting someone. If it's someone I know, they'll call me on my phone or announce themselves at the door. So I just let the knocking go. But then my doorbell rings, and there's more knocking, and more knocking, and more fucking knocking. So finally I'm like, maybe the neighbor's house is on fire or something. I don't know. I answer the door, and it's Tom. "Hey girl," he says with that slick, ominous grin that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "How you doing today?" I want to tell him to go fuck himself, but now more than ever, my instincts are telling me to not make him angry. He's clearly not afraid to push a boundary, and he lives basically just 2 or 3 houses down. All I can imagine is him going home, stewing over my insult, my rejection, and then only having to walk 2 minutes to get back at me. So I make the conversation as short as possible, decline all his advances, once again as politely as I can, and deadbolt my door as quickly as possible once he's gone. He starts coming around at least once a day though, and I stop answering the door. He persists with the knocking, pounding loudly and angrily on the door when I won't answer, but I'm not going to voluntarily engage with this dude in any way. One day, I'm sitting on my living room floor working on something, and the knocking starts. I ignore it. It gets more insistent, more angry, Then he calls my name. But he can't prove that I'm home, so fuck this guy. And then he tries the handle of my door. I always deadbolt it, thank God, but the actual door handle is typically unlocked. So I was sitting right there, not even 3 feet from the door, when I saw and heard it turn violently. If it hadn't have been deadbolted, he would have walked right in and found me sitting there. I probably should have called the cops then, but I had never called the cops on anyone before. It seemed so extreme. He went away shortly after, and I just let it go. So stupid looking back on it. Another day, I'm out mowing my lawn, headphones in, when I look up and, wouldn't you know, here comes fucking Tom. I can't get away from this dude, and it's starting to make me feel absolutely trapped. Yeah, of course he wants to talk, and because I'm a non-confrontational moron at that time, I stop mowing and pull out my headphones. He tells me that he can help me with the mowing. A pretty girl like me shouldn't have to mow her own yard. All I gotta do is come down and ask him. He tells me how he helps out Eric all the time. Eric lives 2 houses down from me, almost directly across from Tom. And Eric is a constant, habitual public drunk. He doesn't bother anyone, just staggers around his yard, hangs out on the couch in his driveway, and feeds the stray cats. Which is problematic because it means we have a booming population of feral, half-mad cats running amok. But I feel for the guy. I'm an animal person myself, so I get it. I've seen Tom and Eric together sometimes, and I guess they're friends. Tom says he mows Eric's grass and he can mow mine too, but I've never seen Tom mow anything. And besides, holy shit, man, just leave me alone. He goes on to say that he sees me driving by his house sometimes. Yeah, there's only 2 ways off this street, and the shorter route is past his house. So I have, by default, driven past his home. But I won't anymore. Never a fucking again. I'll take the long way if it kills me. I decline his help. I decline. I start to avoid being outside at all costs. I usher my daughter as quickly as I can to and or from the car. I carry groceries in as quickly as possible. Even then, though, he can see me from his house. And as I'm rushing toward the door, I'll sometimes hear a loud, low wolf whistle, and I'll look up to see Tom waving at me. I usually pretend that I don't see or hear him, and deadbolt the door as quickly as I can. At some point in the following days or weeks, I order a pizza. When there's a knock at the door, I answer it instantly. For a bewildering second, I can't figure out why my pizza man is shirtless. But it's not my pizza man, is it? It's Tom and his enormous bare beer gut. He's swaying a little, and he leans in against my door frame, pushes a piece of paper into my hand and explains that it's his phone number. He asks again if I've got a boyfriend yet. At this point, I'm desperate, and I feel like it's a bad idea to just blurt out, "Dude, I'm a fucking lesbian." For one, I feel like this won't deter him. In fact, I feel like it might just piss him off and make me a target for some homophobic shit. In fact, it might just make me a target with the whole neighborhood, which sounds extreme. But the first year I lived there, a guy was beaten to death just up the street. He wasn't gay, and it's a longish story, but I always stayed aware that violence wasn't an impossibility here. Plus, I don't have a girlfriend either. It's just me and my daughter all the time, and I just need this dick to leave me alone. I've never met someone who so completely put me on edge. I kept thinking how easy it would be for him to just push past me into the house. I could see him doing it in my head. There was this constant feeling that he was just on the verge of moving, or pouncing, more like it. So I just lie to him and say that, yes, I have a boyfriend and we're very happy. Thank you. So much hetero bliss. He grins that dark, greasy grin again and he says, "I ain't seen no man around here, though." He's watching me and my house, watching who comes and goes. This and the fact that he's actually trying to challenge my lie makes my blood run cold. Like it's a game to him, because he doesn't say it angrily. He says it like it's cute. Like he's caught me against the wall. Like I'm prey and he knows I'm defenseless. I mean, I'm not defenseless. Even as I'm imagining him pushing his way into the house, I'm also imagining what I can use for a weapon, planning to go straight for his eyes, his nose, the groin, all the greatest hits. I wouldn't go down without a fight, that's for sure. But I make up something stupid like how my pretend boyfriend is in the military and he's away right now, but we're very happy. And no, I don't want to have any of the beer you're carrying with you for some reason. He launches into a litany of questions about my pretend soldier boyfriend. How many trucks does he have? Is he good looking? Do I think Tom is good looking? Does he take care of me the way Tom could take care of me? Is Tom good looking? Tom has 2 trucks, you know. He could take care of me. Is my boyfriend a black guy? The last question shuts me down entirely and somehow makes me both more scared and more pissed off. I already know he's a creepy piece of shit, but now he's a racist, creepy piece of shit. The guy just keeps getting worse. I rebuke him again and I tell him I have to go. He says, well, what your boyfriend don't know, that won't hurt him. I make Tom leave. He comes around periodically for a few more years, leaves some gifts at my door at some point, an old doll and some kind of toys from his garage. I think they were for my daughter, but I just threw them away. It seems to go on forever and I debate calling the cops again. I keep thinking that he's just right down the road, and if I call the cops, it's going to become a whole thing. It might only escalate it more. What are the cops going to do? They can't be there every fucking day, and he hasn't even done anything criminal yet. I don't really have a legal leg to stand on. But eventually, gradually, he leaves me alone. Thank God. I think he may have gotten a girlfriend. Maybe. I don't know. The whole thing has taken place over the last 4 or 5 years, but the last several months, maybe 12 to 18 or so, have been pretty quiet. And I can only assume he'd moved on, or away, or gotten the message, or all the above. I barely even see him. But cut to about 3 weeks ago. I'm sitting on my couch late in the evening, around 10 o'clock, when I hear a noise out on my sidewalk. I pause and listen, and then someone turns my doorknob. It's deadbolted like always, thankfully. I'm alarmed now, and that's when the banging on my door starts. I can't see who it is, but I know I'm not expecting visitors. The banging turns frantic, urgent, but I wait. More knocking and knocking and knocking. I think maybe it's my parents. Maybe something's happened to my dad. He has a history of heart problems after all, but why wouldn't they call? Why wouldn't they, right now, just call out and announce who they are? Then I hear a low male voice say, "Man, f*** this bitch." Oh, shit. Now, more knocking and turning in my doorknob. Knocking even on my window now, the one just beside the door. I'm scared, but I also know for sure that I don't know who it is and I'm not opening that fucking door. It also made me kind of mad. Like, me? Fuck you, man. Coming up on my sidewalk and banging on my door while I'm trying to play some Animal Crossing? So I go to the door and shout through it, demanding to know who's there. He calls back. "Nikki, it's me, Ronald Simmons. I've got Eric's beer, let me in." Okay, for the record, my name is not Nikki. I don't even know one, let alone a Ronald Simmons. And Eric lives 2 more houses down. Clearly, this man just has the wrong house, and the situation should be easily cleared up. "Look, I don't know who you are," I tell him through the door. "You have the wrong house, though, and you need to go." But he just bangs on the door some more, insists that he doesn't have the wrong house. "Come on now, Nikki, stop fucking around and just open the door. It's me, Ronald Simmons. I have Eric's beer." He yells at me, tries the door again, bangs on the window in an absolute frenzy. "My name isn't Nikki," I yell back. "You have the wrong house, and you need to fuck off or I'm calling the cops." He just keeps shouting and banging, calling me by the wrong name, begging me to just open the door. He keeps repeating his name, his whole name, Ronald Simmons. "It's me, Ronald Simmons. I have Eric's beer. Open the door, just open the door." We go back and forth for what feels like an eternity. But by this time, my kid has heard the commotion and is freaking out. I'm not sure if this is going to escalate. but he definitely isn't listening to me, and he doesn't seem to be going away. I'm freaked too by how he keeps begging me to just open the door. Like maybe he doesn't have the wrong house at all, and is just trying to get me to come outside. Tom also comes to mind because he and Eric, they're friends, remember? So even though I don't want to, even though I've tried to avoid it for years now, I call the cops. I tell Ronald Simmons that I've called the cops and everything goes quiet for a moment. I think maybe that was enough to make him go away. I explain to the operator what's happening and they instantly dispatch someone. The operator asks if the man is still out there, right as Ronald Simmons begins banging on the door and windows again. Yeah, he's still here. I think he's confused, but he won't leave. No, I don't know him. His name is Ronald Simmons. No, I don't know what he looks like. I can't see him. No, I'm not going to put my face in the window. He's still hitting the window. You need me to look? To get a description? Fuck. So I pull away the curtain and then lift away the heavy, difficult Venetian blinds, but it's pitch dark and my porch light doesn't work. All I can see is a bicycle ditched on my front sidewalk. I hear a woman shouting, and it's difficult to make out, but it sounds like she's yelling at Ronald Simmons, telling him that he's got the wrong house. I think it might be one of my immediate neighbors, but I can't tell. It doesn't stop him either. He tells her to fuck off, and he keeps yelling at me. As this lifetime continues to pass, along with the awareness that some intruder is just one wall away, is overwhelmingly surreal. I can hear him pacing up and down the sidewalk, talking to both me and himself. It feels like maybe he's searching for an entry point, but I can't tell for sure, and all I can really do is listen. I explain everything to the operator as it's happening, and it really doesn't take very long for the flashing lights to appear on my street. I hear officers calling out to Ronald Simmons, and then an exchange of dialogue, but I'm still not opening that damn door. It's hard to make out all the words, but I distinctly hear an officer say, "So, why are you out here bothering this nice lady?" Finally, someone knocks and announces that he's one of the police officers. When I finally do open the door, the said officer asks a few questions. Did he try to actually break into the house? I mean, no, but he kept trying my door like a maniac. He was looking for Eric's house down the street. Yeah, I know. He wouldn't stop saying it. I tried to tell him he had the wrong house, but he kept arguing with me. Is this your bike? No. Okay, we'll make sure he leaves with it. You have a nice night now. I have no idea what happened from there. No idea if they just took him to Eric's house or what. I saw the man briefly, standing in the headlights of the cop car on the road, talking to another officer. This guy was skinny, hair buzzed so short as to be nearly non-existent. Clothes a little too big. Can honestly say that I've never seen Ronald Simmons before in my life. I assumed that they didn't arrest him. I guess he hadn't really done anything criminal, but it still took hours for my heart to slow down and the adrenaline to wear off. I didn't sleep. I just kept waiting for Ronald to come back, or for something else to happen. In the morning, my daughter and I went outside and found that one of our planter boxes on the porch had been demolished. It was kind of old anyway, and probably just got stepped on in the scuffle. I left it alone because it felt weird to touch anything to do with Ronald Simmons. It took several more days for me to finally gather up the scraps and throw them away. It's been 3 full weeks, and yesterday my daughter says, "Mom, didn't we hide our spare key under that box?" Ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you that my soul left my fucking body, she was right. Our old hiding spot had been really high, and it was pretty hard to access, so the last time we'd used it, I just tucked it under the planter and forgot to move it again. But when I cleaned that box up, it wasn't there. I checked the shrubs and soil nearby. I checked the entire porch stoop area. I checked and checked and checked, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Now, maybe, hopefully, it got thrown away with the box. Maybe it's just in the shrubs or the grass or something and I couldn't find it. But I changed the locks that day, just in case. To beat it all, after a long, long period of nothing, I was going out to my car one day this week and heard a loud, low wolf whistle. It's Tom. waving at me from up the street. Again, I pretend I don't see him and just get in the car. There's some more unsettling things going on that are kind of their own stories, like the teenage kid who lives behind me who keeps throwing random toys and household items into my yard from his second-story apartment window. There's also the 2 times this past month that I've been woken up by what I'm fairly certain was someone tapping on my bedroom window in the wee, dark hours of the morning. But Ronald Simmons, that man really freaked me the f*** out, and it's left me in a constant state of vigilance. Living basically alone lends a certain amount of nighttime paranoia, but now I'm always wildly fluctuating between 30 and 99% certain that someone's in my house, or just outside my house, maybe both. It doesn't help that it seems like Tom, who still lives just down the street, might possibly have some involvement here. Or maybe Ronald Simmons was just some random, drunk, high, confused dude, and I'm blowing everything out of proportion. Either way, for the love of God, Ronald Simmons and Tom from down the street, let's just not meet again, okay? I've wanted to share this story for a few months now, and being that it's currently 4:30 a.m. and I can't sleep because I still have residual fear that someone is lurking in my apartment, I thought I would hop on here and share. To set the tone, I bartend and had an awful night at work. I have thicker skin and can handle myself relatively well, but I'd been sexually harassed by a man at the bar I worked at earlier that night. After he was kicked out from my establishment, I decided to stick it out. I took a moment to call my dad and talked with him. We agreed that so long as I was physically safe and emotionally ready to finish my shift, that I should do just that. My boyfriend waited up for me in our shared ground-level apartment despite having worked a full day himself because I was really upset about the comments made to me earlier in the night. To help you visualize, we were laying in bed. Our bed is in the middle of the bedroom against the back wall, and we were lying with our heads where our feet normally were. The TV was no longer playing anything, but still on the media screen, with all the apps like Hulu, Netflix, HBO all listed, but nothing playing. He had his hand on my back, and he had just fallen asleep. I could tell this by his breathing, finally allowing the discomfort of the night's earlier events to begin to fade. That's when I heard it. The faintest words, or word. Hello? I froze. I felt the milliseconds within the second expand. In a matter of moments, my eyes darted to the TV, to my boyfriend, to my phone, and I thought, or more likely desperately hoped, that I'd experienced some type of auditory hallucination. That I was more tired than I had realized. But then I heard it again, clear as day, coming from my hallway. Hello? But it wasn't loud. It was low, quiet, checking to see if I was asleep. At least that's what it felt like upon reflecting. All at once, I realized I could see a figure in my hallway. In that same moment, I realized the voice was coming from a person who did not belong in my home. I haven't forgotten this feeling. The time of the break-in was 4 o'clock. As I'm typing, it's now 4:44 a.m. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've fallen asleep before 4 a.m. since this incident, and I've woken up at around 3 a.m. if I do happen to fall asleep before 4, just to make sure everything's locked up. Hence this post. I just can't sleep. Anyway, I scream with all of my heart. I screamed. My boyfriend jumped up, awake, confused, now yelling himself. He threw open the bedroom door and there was this intruder, standing and just staring in the darkness. We didn't know what he wanted. We honestly still don't know. My boyfriend pushed him, told him that he needed to leave. It was a Saturday night, and we live a 25-minute walk from the bars, which may seem far, but isn't as far as you think. We both just assumed that this was someone coming home from the bar, probably inebriated, and he likely had the wrong apartment. That is, until he coldly and calmly said, "I'll leave," and turned around. But not towards the front door, but towards our sliding glass back door that has an enclosed patio right outside of it. This man slipped out so silently and so quickly before he hopped the 4-foot fencing. At that moment, we decided not to call the police because I was hysterical. I was confused. And in that haze, I had convinced myself all they had was the wrong apartment. It wasn't until we talked about the situation to more people that it was clear there was something more nefarious afoot. And to this day, even though I'm wickedly sleep deprived, even though I have this now ungodly fear that there's someone lurking in the dark recesses of our home, I'm glad that we didn't come face to face with whatever that person had planned that night. If I were to go the rest of my life without hearing that same hello again, it'll be far too soon. Up until junior year of high school, I flew mostly under the social radar and stuck to my status as the nerd girl. But when I was 15, I joined varsity cheer. My school's cheerleaders weren't popular by definition, but everyone kind of knew who we were because we were on the announcements, performed at pep rallies, and generally engaged with the students a lot. I made a lot of friends that year, and some of them happened to be the cool kids. For a while, I thought this was my long-awaited karma payoff for the years of bullying I'd suffered at their hands. I even developed a crush on one of them, a crush which the junior cheer captain herself volunteered to help me pursue. Homecoming is a big deal where I'm from, and I began to fantasize about my crush asking me to go with him. I'd heard rumors he was planning a dramatic proposal, and as homecoming season approached, I became more and more sure I would be his date. The junior cheer captain, who was close with him, kept dropping hints that I was right. One day at practice, she asked me what my favorite candy was, and I knew it would be so my crush would know what to give me. You can imagine my surprise when, after an exhausting theater rehearsal, I walked into the parking lot and was confronted by a guy I'd hardly spoken to, asking me to be his date. My theater friends all applauded, assuming that I was overjoyed. I saw both my parents in the parking lot recording this whole surprise. But most importantly, the cool kids I'd recently befriended were standing right there behind him, egging this kid on. I didn't understand why, because this wasn't a popular kid at all. In fact, he was known to be kind of the school creep. The junior cheer captain was laughing, encouraging him to give me the box of my favorite candy that he was holding. She definitely orchestrated this whole thing. I didn't really know the guy, but I didn't want to humiliate him in front of the coolest kids in school. So I faked a smile and rolled with it. I promised myself that I'd deny him later, in private, so he wouldn't be as embarrassed. Afterwards, when my parents excitedly asked me how I felt about the ordeal, I explained just how uncomfortable it made me. I said that I got strong creepy vibes from the guy. That didn't fly with my parents. My mom accused me of having expectations too high, and my father demanded to know, not for the first time, if I was secretly a lesbian. For what it's worth, I had never had a boyfriend up till this point, or shown much interest in dating. To make his case stronger, I'd just become best friends with the only openly gay girl our school had ever seen. Long story short, I knew that if I shut down my date, I'd effectively declare war on my parents. However, I played my dad's protective instinct against him and persuaded him to let me friend zone my date. After all, he knows how high school boys think. Right? I texted my date that night and explained that I only saw us as friends, but would still be happy to go to homecoming with him. He was pretty polite about it, although I could tell he was interested in me romantically. It seemed we'd reached a deal until the next day at school when one of my cheerleader friends referred to my date as my boyfriend. I corrected her and told her we're just going to homecoming as friends. She seemed confused and told me my date was telling anyone who would listen that I was his girlfriend. A few more of my friends approached me with similar comments, and I confronted my date about them. He denied all involvement and suggested that was just a rumor. I reminded him that we were just friends, and I had zero romantic interest in him. He said that he understood. I got a call from the junior cheer captain. She pretended to be her fake sweet self, but I was still annoyed that she'd led me to believe my crush would be asking me to homecoming. She began her attempt to persuade me that I was wrong to friend zone the guy. She said that she'd spent many afternoons planning this proposal with him, and she knew he was kind of creepy from afar, but he was sweet and caring underneath all of that. I said, if he was such a catch, that she should date him. Annoyed, that's when she dropped the sweet act. She told me that I had to date him because he liked me so much and he'd gone through so much trouble to ask me to homecoming. I had to give him a chance because he'd gone out on a limb for me. I told her she was wrong, and I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do. I owed this guy nothing. I ended up hanging up on her soon after that, but this would just be the beginning. Starting the next Monday, this guy would consistently corner me in the hallway and give me a rose that he held between his teeth. He usually did so between my 6th and 7th periods, when my path through the hall crossed with his. I was deeply uncomfortable with this and told him so, but he wouldn't stop. I took different routes trying to escape him, but the junior cheer captain and her posse made a point of tracking me down so that he would be able to find me elsewhere. Every time he did this, everyone in the area would treat it as a sweet romantic gesture, despite my obvious discomfort. Wouldn't any girl be so lucky to have a boy so devoted to her that he gave her a rose every day? I learned around this point, as a fact, that he was still telling everyone I was his girlfriend. The final straw for me was when he walked into a class he wasn't in, just to find me and give me my daily rose. My teacher, who was close with the cheer captain, let this happen. For weeks afterwards, she would ask me about my date every day. When he would come into the room, I'd tell him to get out, leave me alone. His feelings were clearly hurt, and he left looking like a kicked puppy. My classmates started calling me a cold hard bitch. It didn't matter what I had to say about him. I was the ice queen, refusing this sweet boy's advances. Everyone in the school had decided that I was in love with him, and nobody cared what I had to say about it. My crush, who was part of the popular group, joined the junior cheer captain in pressuring me into returning my date's feelings. At every event where the cheerleaders were present, my date would push his way to the front of the crowd. He would go to great lengths to get my attention. At football games, he would wave a flag in the student section so I'd look at him when we were cheering. The other girls would make comments about how endearing he was when he waited in the parking lot by our bus back to the school, just to hug me and tell me how great I did. I didn't know what else to do other than to let this happen. I'd only recently ascended to a position of visibility. If I conflicted too hard with the cool kids who were so dead set on setting me up with this guy, I could be an outsider all over again. I hoped that if I just kept ranting to my real friends about how creepy he was and publicly let him do what he wanted, that eventually it would all blow over. My school had a 15-second attention span, so some scandal had to one-up me sooner or later. The truth emerged as usual in the locker room. It turns out that the junior cheer captain had been telling him during their afternoons together that I was into him. He'd come to her for help announcing his crush on me, and she'd gone a step further and convinced him that I felt the same, despite the fact that I didn't even know his name a few weeks ago. She'd lied to him for weeks prior to the homecoming proposal, and when I told her that was wrong, she didn't care. She told me I should be grateful because everybody was starting to think that I was gay. My best friend, the lesbian who was starting a gay revolution, and I were inspired. We spread a rumor that we were dating. After all, everybody already thought I was gay. But my date wasn't fazed. In fact, he told everyone that he'd just turned me straight again. Ew. 3 weeks after he asked me, it was finally homecoming night. Thanks to cheer obligations and a complete coincidence involving a switched backpack that left me without my dress, I ended up only attending the dance for half an hour. My date awkwardly stood on the side of the room while I danced my heart out to Mr. Brightside. I almost felt bad for him when, right at the end, the junior cheer captain appeared like a summoned demon to suggest we slow dance at the next opportunity. Thank God I escaped that one by walking to the DJ and suggesting that he play Footloose. My date walked me out to the parking lot to wait for my mom to pick me up. While we waited for her to drive around, which took entirely too long because she still hoped I'd stop making a fuss and just date the guy, he asked me out. I politely declined. He stammered that we could go with a group of people, like the junior cheer captain and my crush. I denied him again and made it clear that we were only friends. I wasn't interested in romantic endeavors because I was too busy. That was actually true. I was in all advanced classes, varsity theater, and cheer, along with working part-time. A few days later, one of our teachers eloped to Vegas, and nobody cared about my love life anymore. My date and I were distanced again by classes and activities and work. It appeared that everything was going back to normal. That Friday at the football game, my crush asked me to sit on his shoulders for the alma mater, kind of a romantic thing at my school. Overjoyed, I accepted, and I hoped this was the beginning of a new chapter for me. I ignored the frantically waving flag in the stands at all costs. Monday, my date stood on a chair in his second period class and announced that everyone should be wary of my crush because he would steal your girl. I heard everyone buzzing about it a few hours later when someone called me a bitch again for breaking my date's heart. I knew I was being dramatic, but I decided not to go to lunch that day, terrified of running into him. I'm so glad that I didn't. Later, I saw on Snapchat that my date had carved my name into his arm with a pair of scissors. His bleeding arm was screenshotted and sent to me by a half dozen people, most of them demanding to know why I had hurt him like this. He did it in the middle of lunch in a crowded cafeteria, and somehow no administrator noticed or cared. The school was buzzing. My date was a broken-hearted victim, and I was the evil, secretly gay bitch who wouldn't give him a chance. I got so many dirty looks. By fifth period, I was just ready to walk out, but my good girl instincts kicked in, and I decided to tough it out for 2 more hours. Around that time, I got a panicked text from one of my cheer friends. While she'd initially been insistent that I date the creepy guy, she'd apparently changed her mind after the lunch incident earlier. She told me that my date, who was in her 5th period class, was absolutely going off the rails. He'd started out saying that he wanted to take his own life because I wouldn't love him. This had escalated to him saying that he was going to take out my crush for stealing me away. Finally, he started talking about how he knew where I lived, and he would make me pay for wronging him. I knew that after 6th period, our paths through the hall would cross. Since the beginning of this ordeal, the school had cracked down on students getting outside, and my alternate route to escape him was no longer an option. My class was at the far end of the hall with nowhere to go but into the central hub, and he would be coming from the other end of the hallway towards mine. I was stuck up a chimney, basically. Desperate, I texted the junior cheer captain to finish what she started and tell him that I was not and had never been interested in him. She'd made this mess, and I would make sure that she had to clean it up. She said she'd go to the counselor, but she didn't know what else to do, that this was way beyond her control now. For the first and only time in my high school career, I skipped class. I hid out in the theater hall and waited for 7th period. I got a few texts during the passing period that my date was waiting for me by the bathrooms. There was a little alcove right there where you can't see people coming around the corner, and the thought of him hiding there and waiting for me to walk by alone horrified me. Right before 7th period began, a few of my classmates burst in cackling and proclaimed that my date was coming down here after school with the intent of killing my crush. They thought this idea was hilarious, but judging by the look on my crush's face, this wasn't a joke to him anymore. Our teacher brushed this off as typical theater drama, pun fully intended. I watched the clock and tried not to cry, knowing that by the time the bell rang, my date would be waiting outside, waiting for both me and my crush to emerge. That day ended up being a work day, so my crush and I were able to escape the classroom and hide out elsewhere in the theater hall to get away from him. He opted for the black box theater. I went for the lighting closet. Obviously, I didn't witness what happened, but my best friend filled me in afterwards. Allegedly, my date had turned up 3 minutes before the bell rang and stood outside the classroom where we couldn't see him when we opened the door. He told everyone standing around that he was ready to have a knife fight with my crush. We don't know if he actually had a knife or not, but the idea that he might was enough to terrify me. His cut-up arm was wrapped in paper towels that he was bleeding through. My best friend told him my crush and I were gone, but he didn't believe her. He stood outside for 25 minutes until the administrators began walking through to make sure no one was in the school who shouldn't be. My date wasn't in theater, so he wasn't allowed to stick around. That night, I texted him that not only would I never date him, but I could no longer even see a friendship between us. I sent him a number to a suicide hotline and told him that he needed to get help. Finally, I told him that he needed to learn what no meant, and that I never wanted to speak to him again. He responded that he was sorry and asked if there was anything he could do to fix this. I told him plainly, no. I don't think he learned the meaning of the word after all, though, because the same pattern repeated itself a few months later on Valentine's Day, the next year at homecoming, senior year Valentine's Day, and prom. But those are other stories entirely. I've since graduated and gone off to college hundreds of miles away from him. My family back home moved from the address my parents gave him. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not gay. My crush, on the other hand, came out a few months later, and we were friends for the rest of high school. I'm working on handling romantic endeavors in a healthy way, but this guy got in my head. He was the first person to ever show interest in me. Ironically, the last time I saw him was my first and only homecoming game after graduating. But this time, I had true friends to defend me when he predictably tried to pull some weird stuff with me. The worst part, looking back on all of this, was somehow feeling like I was at fault for everything. To this day, people from my high school reference the whole ordeal as that time you wouldn't date that poor shy kid. Truth be told, I can't even appreciate red roses anymore. When I was 7, I lived in a dusty, vacant part of the West with an atmosphere straight out of a Judy Blume novel. Despite everyone in my neighborhood living on large, isolated plots of land, mostly ranching families, kids played hockey in the streets, crime was minimal to non-existent, and everybody seemed to know everybody else. I had a tight-knit group of friends. Names changed to protect privacy, but let's call them Shirley, Natalie, and Bailey. We'd been friends since before we could walk, mostly because we were the same age and all lived in the same neighborhood. We weren't idiots, but we were definitely sheltered. The same could be said of our parents, many of whom ended their education after high school or even a bit sooner, and grew up in similar, if not the exact same community, where anyone who'd shake your hand was probably trustworthy. That's why no one noticed anything before it was too late. Just before the summer started, a new family moved in. Families moving in wasn't terribly uncommon, but this family had a girl my and my friend's age, so it became a big deal. Her name was Ella, and her whole family was a bit strange. It took 2 whole weeks for them to introduce themselves to anyone. Plenty of people went over to introduce themselves, but even when it was obvious people were home, no one ever came to the door. Finally, word got around that the father was a minister at some church no one in town had ever heard of, and the wife was working part-time as a tailor. We spent a lot of time outside, and eventually we spotted Ella, my friends and I, and we invited her to join our group in whatever we were up to that afternoon. Through that, we learned that she had 4 older brothers, along with an infant sister. She and her whole family had very antiquated gender role ideas. They prayed before and about virtually anything they did, and would casually mention the end of the world as a non sequitur. Despite this, they managed to establish themselves as pillars of the community. The father, we'll call him Mr. Cyrus, came to every town hall, and his wife Mrs. Cyrus took up a leadership role in the PTA. I think their wholesome Christian image helped defray what would have otherwise been the deeply troubling outbursts of rage Mr. Cyrus would exhibit, sometimes right out in public. He'd hear another adult use a phrase like, "God damn it," and fly into a frenzy about, "How dare you forsake your Lord and Savior, taking his name in vain." His wife would make unsolicited judgmental comments about how other people raise their kids, especially daughters. Despite all of that though, within a few months, you'd never know that they hadn't lived there all their lives. The unspoken understanding in this town was if you left your kids in someone else's care, they had free rein to do whatever they thought best for them, and feed them, instruct them, or discipline them, same as if you were their own. The first time I went to Ella's, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The second time, Mr. Cyrus led us all in prayer before we ate our snack, and afterward. I mentioned to my mom how I found it irritating, and she basically said, "Their house, their rules." So I shrugged it off. Neither of us had any way to know Mr. Cyrus was just testing the waters. A few weeks later, several of our families had gotten together and Mr. Cyrus brought out a rifle, out of nowhere, and asked us girls if we wanted to shoot some cans. He said to the parents, once we had all gotten excited, "I mean, if you're all comfortable with guns." Remember, this is rural America. Not one of us girls hadn't already fired a gun in our lives, and if any of the parents were uncomfortable about them, they would never admit so in public. Things progressed little by little every time I went over. Within the next few visits, my friends and I were made to participate in a mini Bible study lesson. I guess one of the other girls had told their parents about the praying because when we were dropped off, Mr. Cyrus said, "Oh, I forgot to mention. Eileen and I had a family Bible study planned for tonight. If you're uncomfortable with that, you can bring the girls back another night." This was the West in the 80s. Christianity was the default, and even people who didn't really practice felt obligated to pretend that they did. No one in this town would have objected to their kids participating in a Bible study loud enough for anyone else to hear. It didn't even matter because the Bible study was actually sort of fun. None of us complained about it, and we'd all seen how into it Ella seemed and wouldn't have wanted to hurt her feelings by complaining about it. I think Mr. Cyrus took that as one of the final go-aheads needed. In late August that year, Mrs. Cyrus called me and my friend's parents and asked if we wanted to have a sleepover with Ella. Everyone agreed. The first red flag flew up right away, though. Most of us girls spent half our days off from school doing farm chores and helping around the house, so we were all in jeans. I had never seen Ella in pants, ever, but what we wore had never been any sort of problem. When we got there this time, though, Ella had laid out 4 of her dresses on the bed and told us to change into them in order to look more like girls. We all like playing dress up, so we changed without complaint. But then we went downstairs and Mr. Cyrus said, "Look how ladylike you all are now. Doesn't that feel better? You've made God very happy." At this point in a play date, we'd usually go out back and make mud pies or play tag or something, but instead, Mr. Cyrus jumped right into the Bible lesson. He was basically giving a sermon and talked about heaven and hell and the ways to get into heaven and the ways to get into hell. He scared our 7-year-old minds half to death about the fires of hell. Then he did what I can only describe as a cartoony attempt at hypnosis. This was all years ago, so it's a little fuzzy, but he dangled some piece of jewelry, a necklace or something, in front of us and swung it back and forth. While he did that, he recited Bible verses about telling the truth and repentance and the end of times and clean souls entering the glory of heaven. Then he sat us all down on a couch. We were all thoroughly freaked out at this point by the heaven-hell talk, but figured everything else was just a religious ritual of their home because he'd so carefully desensitized us over the past few months. He talked about sin and repentance and asked us if we wanted to go to heaven or hell. I think you can guess what we all said. He said the only way to get to heaven was to be baptized. One of my friends, Shirley, said she'd already been baptized, but Mr. Cyrus cut her off. Baptized into a real faith, God's faith. He asked if we wanted to know how we could become baptized, and we said yes. He said by confessing our sins and making them right with God, committing to living in a Christ-like way, and most importantly, accepting Jesus as our Lord and Savior. Sounded easy enough to us. For the next, I don't know how long, there were no clocks in this house, and it was after dark by then. We basically did an intense Bible study. It could have been anywhere between 10 minutes and 4 hours. When you're little and not accustomed to going to church, any amount of Bible study feels like an eternity. This was interspersed with different prayers for our salvation and making different promises about rejecting sin and resisting temptation. We were all getting very tired at this point and feeling our patience wearing thin for tolerating others' religious beliefs. Then there was a whole bunch of prepper stuff, different types of guns, talking about growing your own food, the importance of self-reliance, basically a lecture on survival skills, but with the constant emphasis that the greatest survival skill is being a good Christian. He kept us up most of the night after that praying and such. He did some ritual blessing with rubbing oil on our foreheads. He vaguely talked on and off throughout the night about whether we'd want to go with Ella to a wonderful place with lots of other kids who love Christ, and said he'd ask our parents about taking us there on a weekend trip. I knew when I was agreeing with him that I had no interest, but my mom had taught me the polite thing to do when you get an invitation to something, even one that you have no intention of going to, is to smile and express interest. Then, closer to the date, say that something came up. So I just smiled and expressed that interest. He didn't feed us anything the entire time we were there. By the time the sun started to come up, we were baptized in their backyard. Then we finally fell asleep, and a few hours later, we were picked up by our parents. I told my mom I didn't want to go back there because it was too religious for me. I told her we were up a lot of the night praying. I told my mom there was no food as well, but since I'm such a picky eater, she was too used to hearing they had nothing to eat, when I really just meant something like they served meatloaf and wouldn't even make me a grilled cheese sandwich to eat instead. We stopped playing with Ella and just kind of put all of this behind us until high school, mentioning once every few years, "You guys remember that weird religious playdate?" Since we didn't really understand any of the promises we had made to Mr. Cyrus, we didn't pay half a mind to keeping any of them. We were exhausted and surrounded in daily life by Jesus rhetoric that everyone took seriously in the moment, and then ignored once the preacher was out of earshot. In high school, it was heavily rumored that Ella's father, Mr. Cyrus, had Florence Hotef, famed for her involvement with the controversial Branch Davidians, visiting his home and leading some sort of prayer circle for him, as well as the people from his church. While I still don't know if she really came to visit him, it was all but irrefutably confirmed in high school that Mr. Cyrus belonged to an offshoot of Shepherd's Rod, the Christian apocalyptic extremist group rooted in Seventh-day Adventism. After this came out, nobody really talked to them much after that, in town even, because we all considered it to be a cult. And once you learn that somebody belongs to a cult, what's the point in wishing them well and being friendly, given the manipulative nature and coercion that's fundamental to cult beliefs? After high school, I moved on and went to a college a few states away, so a lot of this faded from my mind. But for the friends and family that I left back in my small town, they got to witness the steady downfall of Ella's family. At first, they would hold weekend gatherings with dozens of people at their home. These were seemingly followers of Mr. Cyrus, but over time, the gatherings began to dwindle. Sometime after that, Mr. Cyrus would start walking down Main Street, trying to interact with children and early teens by sharing the Word of God. But now that he didn't have the benefit of a child in the age range of the kids that he was targeting, there was no draw to get these new kids to trust him. Eventually, their farmhouse burned down one night. I don't think that anyone was hurt, although it was suspicious how it all went down. And once the remains were done smoldering, Mr. Cyrus picked up and moved his family without as much as a word to anyone else in the community. No one in town knows where that family took off to after that, but I don't doubt that they had their sights set on another small rural town somewhere else, where they could lather, rinse, repeat what they tried to do in my hometown. I wonder even now if they were successful, or if Mr. Cyrus eventually led his family down a Kool-Aid-laden path, the same one that other cultists had paved the way for. Ever since I was a kid, I remember my grandma denouncing horror of any kind. Ghoulish Halloween masks, haunted houses, scary movies. I had attributed this aversion to her background in faith. She's Hispanic and a devout Catholic. She believes anything horror-related is wrong, evil, you name it. So imagine my shock and curiosity when my grandparents shared a bombshell. Back in 1974, my grandpa convinced my grandma to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This would be her first and last scary movie of her life. The weekend after the movie, my grandpa, grandma, my then toddler-aged mother, and my aunts and uncles decide that they wanted to go horseback riding for the first time. Since everyone lived in Wisconsin, my family made the journey to a farm about 2 hours away. For the most part, everyone's in high spirits. Who can say no to a family adventure on a crisp autumn Wisconsin day? Despite the others' excitement, my grandma was worried. Since she doesn't care for horses, she chooses to stay behind on her own with my mother. When my family arrives at the farm, it's about 3 o'clock. According to my grandma, she watched everyone get saddled up and then slowly ride off into the tangle of trees. The guide leading my family called out that the ride would last less than 2 hours, mentioning different trails, the need for breaks, things of that nature. My grandma figures that everyone will be back by 5 o'clock. She waits with my mother in the car, playing games, reading storybooks, and trying to silence that bubbling anxiety within her. Needless to say, 5 o'clock comes and goes. No sign of my family. By this time, my mother has fallen asleep, which leaves my grandma with no way to distract herself from her worries. Finally, when 6 o'clock rolls around, she calls out to a farmhand from her car window. No way is she leaving the safety of her vehicle, though. She demands to know why her family hasn't returned yet, when 5 o'clock has long since passed. By now, darkness has begun bleeding into the Wisconsin sky. The farmhand assures her that everything's okay and that extra paths are taken throughout the ride. He tells her that her family should return soon. Now, keep in mind, this was well before cell phones were a thing. Also, a week before, she had seen her very first scary movie, and it had scared the shit out of her. At this point, my poor grandma feels like she's living out a scene from the movie she just saw. She tries to contain her worry and begins a hushed, fearful prayer, until the flash of lightning that is soon followed by ear-splitting thunder. The noise wakes my mother, who starts to cry. My grandma must now not only ponder the frightening question of where her family went, but she also has a stressed, howling 2-year-old to deal with. It's now reaching 7 o'clock. The storm is growing more ferocious by the second. My grandma has to pee and her bladder feels like it's going to explode, but between the roar of the storm and the images of crazed country maniacs plaguing her mind, she refuses to get out of the car. She plans in her head that if they aren't back by 7:30, she's going to leave, find the nearest gas station to phone for help. 7:30 comes, her family hasn't emerged from the woods. As she's scrambling around the car for the keys, she realizes my grandpa never gave them to her. The pound of a fist against her window shakes her from her whirlwind of panic. The panic amplifies by 1,000,000 though when she notices a sizable, brawny man peering in at her. He's wearing a jacket and the hood is covering his head. My grandma says that by now, it felt like someone had pushed a button and sent the world into slow motion. Everything crawled by at a snail's pace. "Why don't you and the little one come inside?" the man yells. His words are authoritative and carry no hint of warmth. He isn't speaking from a place of concern. He's ordering my grandma into the farmhouse. All my grandma can do is shout, "Where's my family?" The man responds gruffly, "We're looking for them." My grandma orders him to call the police. The next words the man said made my grandma literally piss her pants. "We don't need the police." As he turns to go back into the house, he says, "You and the baby can come inside whenever you're ready." My grandma starts to silently sob, wholly convinced that her family has been brutally murdered and that she and her baby will be next. In the chaos of this moment, she hears someone calling her name, but because of the pitch black darkness and her profound fear, she thinks she must be hearing things. But then she hears her name again, this time even louder. "Dora, help me." It's my grandpa's voice. When she realizes this, she puts my mom in the back seat, grabs the wooden baseball bat my grandpa keeps under the seat, locks the doors, and then exits the car. "Keep calling my name. I can't see you," she cries. After what feels like an hour, she follows my grandpa's voice to his location. When she gets to him, she realizes my grandpa needed help because he's guiding my aunt across the high, rain-soaked grass. She had hurt her ankle. They're both drenched from mud and rain and covered in scratches. The rest of my family is nowhere in sight, though. Before my grandma can assume the worst, she hears my uncle calling for my grandpa. One by one, everyone shuffles out of the wild woods and through the tall grass. Everyone's soaked, injured in some capacity. Cuts, gashes, limping. All are shaken as well. When they finally make it back to the car, the sounds of running engines and the flood of headlights gets the attention of the man inside the farmhouse. The farmhouse door swings open and that brawny man comes to stand on the porch. With an amused chuckle, he draws, "Oh, you all made it out of there?" That's when my grandpa shouts back, "That dumb asshole left us out there and never came back." All the man says in response is, "I'll have to talk to him about that. You all can come inside." His freakishly flippant and joking attitude sinks into his words. He knows damn well they aren't going into his house. My grandma begs my grandpa to leave it and get them out of here. With that, my family tears out of there as fast as humanly possible. Once my family was back home and safe, my grandpa explained what had happened. During the ride, the guide led them deep into the woods to a creek where the horses stopped for a drink. As the horses rested, the guide told my family he had to go do something and would be back in 20 minutes. My family thought this was strange, and my grandpa even anxiously joked, "You're coming back, right?" The guide simply gave a low chuckle and took off on his horse. 20 minutes came and went, and the guide didn't come back. My family continued to wait as they had no idea where to go. They could see the sky blackening above them. They knew they would have to make it out on their own eventually. As my family rode off, they tried to remember the path back to the farm. They wandered aimlessly, though. Eventually, rain started to fall. Pulsing lightning and the crash of thunder spooked the horses. Everyone but my grandpa got thrown off. When my grandpa climbed off his horse to help the others, his own horse galloped away as well. From there, it was a nightmare trying to navigate the woods while wounded and roaming through a thick void of darkness. The only advice I can give you is this. If you're going horseback riding, you better make damn sure it doesn't become a horseback ride from hell. This happened about 5 years back, although it still comes up in conversation because we genuinely just don't know what happened or was about to happen to us. I'm posting this story to hear your thoughts and ideas. It was around 7 p.m. in November, so it was past dark in Metro Detroit. I was driving and my fiancé was riding passenger. We were exiting a pretty populated highway when we turned onto one of the mile roads near the city's shopping mall and outlet centers. Being in close proximity to the mall, it was strange that the boulevard was that empty at that time of night. So we're driving on this deserted westbound side of the boulevard when we noticed there was a stopped, yet running, vehicle in the middle lane. Again, it was dark aside from the streetlights that lined the road every 80 yards or so. But the brake lights were obviously lit, and we were coming up quick. My fiancé and I were talking in the car at the time when we both kind of stopped to verbally question what we were both seeing. It was strange behavior, especially since the speed limit is 45 or 50 miles per hour on this road. You don't want to be stopped, especially this close to people exiting the highway. So we slowed down since we're cautious drivers. We approached and passed the vehicle in the far left lane, as it was in the middle, and when we were about a car length in front of it, the driver gunned it and started speeding to catch up to us. We never left our left-hand lane, but at this point, I was braking because, again, this behavior was so off, and we noticed their driving was erratic. Braking was almost instinctual, as much as it probably wasn't safe to do so. Continuing to drive down this mile road, still no traffic we can see in either direction. We noticed the driver was swerving the car between the middle lane and the left lane, as if trying to intentionally sideswipe us. Instant red flag. It wasn't like the driver was intoxicated or texting and just doing a poor job at staying in their own lane. This was a driver in control of their swerving and coming dangerously close to hitting the side of my Jeep, going 45 miles per hour. Bad vibes. Before we knew it, we were blinded by a spotlight coming from the driver's window into my car via the passenger side window. I have 20 tints on my Jeep windows, which usually help control the brightness of the sun most mornings and evenings. And even with the tints, this spotlight stunned us, and we couldn't see anything but white. I don't have time to check my mirrors before slamming on my brakes. I'm not even sure I would have been able to see in my mirrors after being blinded. I remember my fiancé screaming, "What the f-?" We opened our eyes and the driver was yards ahead of us now, speeding to get away. I had my fiancé dial 911 immediately. I don't take bullshit, so I started racing down the road to catch up to him for a license plate number. In Michigan, we have Michigan left turn lanes, which I'll take a second to explain. Basically, you can't turn left from these lanes. In order to make a left at the intersection you're at, you'll have to either make a right turn and make a U-turn, or go straight through the intersection and make a U-turn, then make a right turn to get you to the left like you had hoped to. I could see this vehicle up ahead of us turning into one of the entrances to the mall parking lot, which is a huge roundabout. The roundabout speed limit is about 20 miles per hour, with frequent stop signs and intersections. My fiancé connected with dispatch on the phone as I was trying desperately to catch up to this vehicle. They were blowing every red light and stop sign in sight, though. Dispatch recommended we didn't follow, but I kind of did anyway, because I was really upset and committed to grabbing their plate number, but from a safe distance and at a safe speed. No way I was going to tail this person when we didn't know if they had a weapon or something. Long story short, this driver knew we were following them, and they were speeding through the roundabout, cutting drivers off and blowing intersections when we eventually lost sight of them. At this point, the police said the cops in the area were already on their way looking for the vehicle we described, and that we should just leave it to them. We weren't going to jeopardize our safety and the safety of other drivers just because I was pissed. So we stopped our chase, but still crossed an intersection into another shopping center across the street, one opposite from where we saw the driver enter. We figured we could prowl instead of chase, just in case we saw them again. We never did see that car though. Never found out who the driver was or what his motive was, or even if the cops found him. We knew it was a male driver because we saw him through the driver's side window before he blinded us. White male, dark ball cap. He drove a dark sedan, looked like a newish Ford Fusion at the time. It was a close run-in, and I'm not sure what would have happened if he had successfully crashed into us on that deserted mile road, or if his spotlight had successfully veered my car off of the road. We don't think this was a case of road rage since we didn't do anything to provoke him. To the dude who scared the crap out of us and took away our eyesight while driving a moving vehicle. Middle finger emoji to you, bud. When I was in my early 20s, I went to Walmart for a grocery haul. I walk in the store, get me some McDonald's before I go shopping because we all know you can't go grocery shopping hungry. I quickly smash my 2 McChickens, then go about shopping. Well, 15 or so minutes later, I got what was coming to me. Some intolerable stomach pains and a bathroom trip a-brewing. So I run to the bathroom, nearly in a panic. I close the stall and brace for the storm that's about to happen. There's just one other person in the bathroom with me, and they're in the stall to my left, the handicap stall. By the shoes that I can see under the barrier, I'm thinking it's a little girl. So as I'm going about my business, looking down at my phone to pass the time, all of a sudden I see something in the upper corner of my eye. It was a phone on the top of the stall door in front of me, not the handicap stall, but the camera's facing me, and there was obviously a hand holding the phone. There was somebody in the bathroom recording me taking a shit. The whole thing went by so quickly, but I was in an incredibly vulnerable position, as you can imagine, and all I could think to do is scream, "What the f*** are you doing?" The person immediately runs off, and I hear the little girl in the stall beside me jump up off the toilet and run away. By the time I could wipe and run out of the bathrooms myself, obviously whoever was recording was long gone. So now I'm completely mortified, and I ask for one of the managers and tell them what happened. They were not so concerned that someone was straight up recording me in the bathroom with my pants down and legs wide open for God knows how long. I tell them to please look at the cameras because I feel completely violated and I'm concerned for my safety. Within 10 minutes, they return and say that a little girl ran out of the bathroom shortly before me and that it was probably her just joking around getting pictures of people in the restroom. I argued with them and said that I know it wasn't the little girl because she was in the stall next to me, and while she ran out after I yelled as well, it was a few seconds after the person who had been holding a phone to my face. They were adamant that that's who it was though, because no one else could be seen on camera before the girl or after me. I never escalated it any further with the Walmart management. Looking back though, I was gaslit into thinking it was just some dumb kid. But the next few days when I actually thought about it, that wasn't possible. I came to the conclusion that there's some nasty poop-peeping pervert hiding in the supply closet or something in the bathrooms, taking videos of vulnerable women taking shits. I've been convinced all of these years that I'm probably out there on some website on the dark web somewhere for people who have these types of fetishes. Not long before that particular incident, I was followed by a car out of Walmart and nearly made it to my house before I realized. I drove around the neighborhood to make sure it was actually following me, and they definitely were. I only got rid of them because I drove to a gas station and screamed, "This person is following me. Someone please call the police." Once they heard what I was doing, they drove off. I never got a look at him or her, unfortunately, and I didn't file a police report either. I can't help but wonder if this was the same person that took the video of me in the bathroom. Needless to say, I haven't been back to Walmart since. Doesn't seem like anything good happens there anyway. This happened all the way back in 1988, when I was in the 7th grade. Our school system required that all students take a semester of woodshop and a semester of home economics every year of middle school. Semesters were 5 months long. In my part of Canada at that time, middle school was grades 7 and 8. Our woodshop teacher was a man in his mid-50s named Mr. P. Mr. P had quite the reputation. Older girls warned younger girls every year. If you were a female, you never wanted to be stuck alone in class with him. If you got detention, you begged a classmate to either intentionally get in trouble so you'd have to serve detention together, or begged to have them stay late to work on their project after school. Anything to avoid being alone with him. As the older girl said, he would start to say hugely inappropriate and graphically sexual things, and then move on to touching. Starting with the girl's hands, arms, then her hair, shoulders, back, and then, well, worse. Much, much worse. It was an open secret. The principal and school board had to have known, but things weren't like they are now. People didn't listen when kids complained, and the school board was heavily invested in covering for bad and abusive teachers. We were sort of left having to deal with these things on our own, with no support and no actual adult help. Wendy was a girl in my class. We weren't close friends by any means, as she hung out with a different group than I did, but we got on well enough. Reasonably good acquaintances, I guess. One day, Wendy got in trouble for talking in class when Mr. P was trying to go over safety info for a new piece of equipment, and was promptly given detention. Her friends were all on the same sports team, which was leaving the school right at dismissal to go play another school's team, so they couldn't stay with her. Wendy had been given detention by Mr. P once before, once again for talking when she shouldn't have been, so she was petrified at the prospect of being stuck alone after school with him once more, and she went from classmate to classmate for the rest of the day, begging for anyone's help. Everyone had some different reason as to why they couldn't stay, so she was getting absolutely desperate and was nearly in tears. Finally, she got to me. I wasn't on a sports team. I was a clumsy, bookish, shy, nerdy kid who avoided sports whenever and wherever possible. I also didn't have anything going on after school that day, so I agreed. I said that I would stay and work on the crappy birdhouse project that we'd been assigned. Wendy got to Mr. P's classroom before I did. I had stopped at my locker and the restroom before heading on to the shop room. When I got there, Mr. P was already sitting right beside Wendy, and it looked like he was about to stroke her hair. When he saw me, he yanked his hand away as if he'd touched something hot. Then he stood up, putting space between himself and her. He glared at me and demanded to know why I was there. I stammered out the lie that I wanted to work on my birdhouse assignment. In reality, though, I was further ahead in my project than most of the other kids were. So instead of grabbing my nearly finished birdhouse from the rack, I grabbed Wendy's and began working on it for her. For the entire 45-minute detention, Mr. P sat behind his own desk, silently yet obviously seething and glaring at me. When Wendy's detention was over, we took off nearly at a run. She thanked me profusely, and that was that. As far as I know, Mr. P never faced any real consequences for being a PDF file pervert. I'm 100% certain that he ran the same sick game on many other girls over the time that he was an instructor, especially given that at that time, he was the longest tenured employee at our school. It makes me sick to know that he pretty much got to do whatever he wanted to, and nobody was there to hold him accountable. We were all just kids, but the fact that no adult ever stepped in, either officially or unofficially, to put this man in check depresses me like little else in this world. It's an absolute fact that those in charge allowed for the abuse of generations of young girls. I personally believe that there's a particular patch of fire and brimstone awaiting all of those that allowed something like this on their watch. In my mind, if anyone knew and didn't do anything, then they're all complicit in the acts of this predator. So last Sunday evening, I was putting together a new dresser I had bought in the rear bedroom of my apartment. The bedroom door was open, and I could see down the main hallway into the living room where my fiancé was standing with our 2 kids while they were playing. I think it was around 7:30 p.m. just for context. A knock comes on the door. My 6-year-old son runs to it and opens it, even though he knows he's not supposed to. This is something we're working on." He was coming down from his birthday party excitement and just went for it, probably thinking that someone else was stopping by for his party, even though it was long over. There's a woman at the door. I recognize her as an upstairs neighbor from the other side of the building. She says she needs help and walks straight into our apartment. She began frantically talking nonsense, saying she was locked out of the building that she's in, saying that she can get into her apartment, but couldn't get in the building, then in the same breath saying she can't get into her apartment. She appears extremely disoriented and keeps saying she's just so exhausted or really tired over and over again. She appears to be out of it, not balancing very well. Speech pattern is sloppy, appears to be in some sort of a light daze. To me, immediately, it appeared that she was having some sort of episode. But as soon as I stepped foot near her, I could tell something fishy was going on. She continued to talk in circles and not make any sense, saying her parents were going to be so worried if she didn't check in with them. This woman lives alone. She begins repeatedly asking us to call numbers for her. Her phone is in her hand, on the video record setting, but I can see that it's not recording. I see her hand rolling something in her pocket over and over. From where I'm standing, it appears to be a screwdriver. As she's telling my fiancé numbers to dial, she can't come up with them. Every phone number she gave us to call for help was multiple digits short. They weren't phone numbers. Then when I said that that's not enough numbers to make a phone number, she would switch to a different phone number, then stop halfway through saying it. This happened no less than 8 times, and finally, I'd had enough. She kept saying her phone wasn't working, so I had to let her try to use my phone, but she ended up just standing there holding it, not using it, just holding onto it continuously, talking her nonsense. I'm thoroughly uncomfortable at this point, and very upset that this woman has entered my apartment without invitation, and is acting this way around my kids. I tell my fiancé to take the kids to the back of the house, and try to coax this woman out by saying, "Let's go check on your apartment. Come on, I'll go with you. We'll see if it's open." I try to lead her out of my apartment, but she says she's too exhausted and needs to sit down. Then she proceeds to pop a squat on my living room couch. I'm not at all thrilled with this. In fact, I'm livid, but I keep my cool and realize I'm dealing with crazy here. My fiancé flanks her from the back so she can't get any further into the apartment, or anywhere near the kids again. I continue trying to coax her out. After about 5 minutes of trying to convince her to leave the apartment and come with me to check hers out, she finally walks over ever so slowly out of our basement apartment. I'm a stairway ahead of this woman already, telling her to follow me up to hers. On the way to her apartment, she attempts to get into 2 other apartments that are not hers. I tell her each time, that's not where you live. When I arrive at her door, it's wide open. She hasn't caught up with me yet, so I take a quick glance inside the door. The couch cushions are thrown everywhere, and the living room is looking torn up and turned upside down. She arrives behind me and tries again to get into another neighbor's apartment across the hall. I tell her again that that apartment isn't hers, but here, yours is wide open. Finally, I get her to go inside of her apartment. When she does, she apologizes to me saying, "I'm sorry this is how we had to meet. I'm just so tired." I say that it's okay, and I quickly head back downstairs to my apartment. I have such an uneasy feeling that I decide to call the cops and let them know some woman who I've never spoken to before showed up at my door asking for help and acting disoriented. They say they'll send someone over to check on her. About an hour later, police arrive and knock on her door. They get no answer, so they leave. Well, 4:15 a.m. rolls around. My 6-year-old son and 1-year-old daughter have been asleep through the night, as have myself and my fiancé. I get up to use the bathroom. As I'm using it, I hear the lightest of knocks on our apartment door. It's so light, I actually second-guessed if I heard anything at all. I call out to my fiancé to ask her if she heard anything. She says she didn't hear a thing. So we both head towards the living room together, just to see if we hear anything present itself. No sooner do we step foot in the living room that we begin to hear scratching at our front door. The unmistakable sound of someone clawing at your door isn't something I wish for anyone to hear in the middle of the night. It is truly horrifying. I tell my fiancé to go be with the kids, make sure they're okay. I opened the door to find the woman from earlier, standing at the top of the flight of stairs in front of my apartment, just looking down and staring at the door. That is terrifying. So I told her, no fucking way are we doing this shit again. I proceeded to call her a crazy bitch and tell her to get the fuck away from my apartment, to stay away from me and my family. I also told her I'm calling the cops right now. No sooner does that escape my mouth, she scurries away out of sight, presumably back to her apartment, and I do as promised. I immediately call the cops. They show up and ask her all of the mental health questions, which she apparently answered adequately enough. So they said there's nothing they can do. This woman was very clearly in some sort of state, and now she's harassing me and my family and disturbing our peace and the safety of my kids. They told her to stay away from us, and I haven't seen her in a week since then. But I can't help but continue to think about it. Ever since the first time she entered the apartment acting crazy, I've had this pit in my stomach that I can't ignore, and this uneasy feeling that whatever this is, it's not over. I still don't know what's going on, and it makes me feel really weird. I don't know what to make of it. Another neighbor of ours, one that we happen to be cool with, said that her doorknob was being jiggled by someone in the middle of the night too. Well, putting two and two together, we know that it was this crazy woman. I'm not gonna lie, this whole thing has got me sick. The complex sent her a warning that this behavior is unacceptable, but I really don't know what to do or how to feel about it. My first instinct is to respond with anger and physically defend myself and my family. If you guys have any idea, input is both welcomed and appreciated. So recently, I touched on this experience that I'm going to share via a comment in another thread. But as I'd basically buried this memory for close to a decade, simply just re-remembering this experience was all it took for the floodgates to open and for everything to come rushing back, including details that I'd failed to include in the aforementioned comment. That said, I felt compelled to share it here, especially because it felt good to type it all out for the very first time. Some of you may think of this as one of the more mild posts here, but I can assure you that it absolutely was an insanely terrifying experience for me at the time. And even now, I'm 100% convinced that the man in this story is a potential predator, stalker, or at the very least, someone who possesses similar qualities and characteristics to those things. So, back in 2014, I'd gone on a first date with a guy that I'd matched with on Tinder. I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time, and worked on Capitol Hill for a U.S. congressman. While nice, handsome, and a self-declared Southern gentleman, Tinder guy was extremely pushy leading up to our first date. My job was even more insanely busy than normal during that time, often requiring frequent all-nighters and entailing exactly zero social life to speak of. Looking back now, it's painfully obvious that I didn't have the time or space in my life for dating back then. But after months of my bestie begging me to let her create a Tinder profile, I basically just gave in. For weeks, I tried to reschedule said first date due to work being crazy, but Tinder guy literally would not take no for an answer. He also was extremely manipulative and clearly gifted at it, as he basically guilt-tripped me and broke me down to finally agree to a first date with him. But I figured that it was only dinner. What's the big deal? So I go on the date. Well, the date went fine on paper and probably looked as such to any bystanders. Tinder guy nonetheless kind of gave me the ick for some reason. At that point, I couldn't lock down why. He was polite, had a great job, was attractive, but still, something about the way he would continue to gaze at me so intently, almost without blinking, it was really unsettling. It was like he was playing some intense, weird-ass staring contest, one where he was the only contestant. There were a lot of other icks and red flags during our date, but the first major one was the fact that I was casually held hostage, or at least that's what it felt like. At the conclusion of our dinner, and after politely thanking him for the meal and knowing 100% without a doubt that there would be no second or future dates with this guy, I tried to make my exit home, telling him that I had an early workday ahead of me, which wasn't a lie. But instead, Tinder guy, of course, pressures me into going to a bar next door with him for a nightcap. Looking back now, and thanks to therapy, I've learned a lot about manipulation and how it can be weaponized. Tinder Guy was a master at this, and at that point in my life, I had no chance. After 2 drinks that, mind you, I didn't want, I again mentioned that I need to get home, this time with a little bit more force. Tinder Guy acts like he doesn't hear me. He gets up, heads to the bar before returning with beers for the both of us. I'm beginning to get annoyed and a little pissed, so after a few minutes, I fake an incoming call from my boss, essentially channeling my inner Meryl Streep, and proceed to give the best acting performance of my life. And not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I should obviously get all the Oscars because, holy shit, it worked. The good news, Tinder Guy totally buys my Academy-worthy acting. He finally stops ignoring my polite pleas to go home, and he agrees to let me go. However, he insists on sharing an Uber home, even though we live in completely separate neighborhoods nowhere near each other. Not to mention the very obvious fact that I didn't want this creeper to potentially gain any sort of idea where I lived or come anywhere near where I rested my head. Quite frankly, I knew at that point that I didn't want to spend one more minute nor have anything more to do with this creepy stranger, including being trapped in a confined space like a car. So I tried to refuse, repeatedly, as I was feeling increasingly more uncomfortable by the minute, obviously not wanting him to see where I live. But again, this guy wouldn't take no for an answer. So in a major, what the f are you doing moment, especially looking back now 10 years later, I silently stomached my anxiety, and we proceed to Uber to my neighborhood. Though I did get out at a different address a few blocks away from my place, so he wouldn't have my exact address. As I attempt to disembark from the car, and as quick as the flash, Tinder Guy follows behind me. He grabs my shoulder and spins me around, before then aggressively kissing me. Like, I'm talking straight up manhandling my face with his tongue. Apologies for the graphic description, especially if it results in bringing you any sort of trauma. But if I had to experience it, you do too. As Tinder Guy finally lets go of my head, I'm trying my best to swallow back vomit, and after 10 minutes of placating him, I finally get him to accept that this first date is over, that I'm going to sleep, seemingly in the complete random stranger's house whom we're currently standing in front of, and he reluctantly agrees to leave. As soon as our Uber leaves with Tinder Guy and he's out of sight, I run to my actual home. I lock and deadbolt the door as soon as I get inside, and I all but sink to the floor in disbelief. In the end, once I'd calmed down and felt secure again, I was mostly just relieved to be home safe and sound, and that I'd survived a date with a deeply unsettling man. I'd even joked to my roommates at the time, well, can't wait to never talk to that dude again. But alas, me 10 years ago was a naive fool. Instead, immediately following our date, Tinder Guy proceeded to send me a barrage of texts the entire rest of the night, fawning all over me, and mostly asking over and over again if we could FaceTime. I lied though, and said that I was already in bed, basically asleep, and since I had absolutely zero intention of ever speaking to this person again, I thought that that would be the end of it. Tinder Guy continued to text me nonstop over the next few days, and I'd either ignore him or send him short, curt responses. While it was a cop-out, I'd planned on messaging him the truth, letting him down gently at the end of the week, aka when I wasn't swimming in work craziness. As I mentioned earlier, I worked on Capitol Hill for a US congressman at the time, and as such, my office was subject to strict security screenings. Think metal detectors and X-ray scanners at the building's entrance. But this security also extended to incoming mail, packages, and all deliveries. So the day after this first date debacle, I get a call on my office line from the off-site Capitol Hill Package Center, stating that they're currently processing a package for me, and that it should be delivered to my office in 2 days. I think to myself, that's odd, I'm not really expecting anything. So who would be mailing me something? But I shrug it off, as it's not the first time I've received unsolicited packages due to the nature of my job, and I basically forget all about it. That is, until that Friday. Our office receptionist comes to my cubicle with an obnoxiously gaudy, over-the-top bouquet of roses, along with an accompanying card. Before even reading it, I know who's responsible. But if I'm being honest, the real reason that I felt so deeply weirded out by this was the sheer fact that I'd never told Tinder Guy who I worked for, or hell, even which state or delegation my boss belonged to. I'd given him zero clues as to whom the member I worked for was, purposefully, I might add. And while my social media settings were pretty tight and private anyway, I didn't include the name of the member office in which I worked in on any of my online profiles, including LinkedIn. I also didn't give Tinder Guy my last name, so I have no idea how he would have found it to begin with. There are 535 total congressional offices on Capitol Hill. That said, there's approximately 15,000 congressional staffers who work there, and there's no telling how many staffers who share my first name you'd have to go through in searching for my last name, as well as office address. Needless to say, if I wasn't creeped out enough by this guy before or at this point, I was 1000% full-fledged freaked out now, especially reading the note that accompanied the flowers. The lowlights of which include him talking about how great of a kisser I was. Ick. What he wanted to do to me. I felt my bile rising. How he hoped that I could meet his family one day. Just add delusional to the list of descriptors for this guy. And how he couldn't wait to see me again. In your dreams, bud. One good thing that came out of this whole experience is that it finally and obviously gave me the balls to end things with Tinder Guy via text. Dating is the absolute worst. And until this experience, if I was talking to someone but also knew at the same time that I wasn't interested, I would still engage and respond to messages and basically lead them on, all because I didn't want to hurt feelings and felt guilty. I now realize how unfair that is to the other person, and have since vowed that I'll never cop out when it comes to uncomfortable messages, topics, or issues that the recipient needs and deserves to hear. It's also helped instill in me that whole politeness mantra. I'm fortunately in a serious, long-term relationship now, but while dating or even in my regular life, if I ever feel uncomfortable and uneasy like Tinder Guy made me feel, I now fight the urge to be agreeable and polite, and either directly cut ties or at least explain why I'm blocking before cutting off communication. Anyway, apologies for the length. This is something that I've never shared with anyone outside of my roommates at the time, so it was cathartic to get it all out. Those of you out there who are still swiping, I encourage you all to stay safe. I'm going to share a story with you about how I was once mugged and how I'm 100% convinced that it was a setup. I moved to East Los Angeles the summer after high school. My parents had bought a house from my aunt and uncle who had just moved out. We already had family in the area, so it felt familiar to me. The neighborhood itself was nice and quiet. The plan for me was to live with my parents and save money while I figured out what I wanted to do next. I was getting ready to start community college and apply to a medical assistant program. Back then, everyone had an opinion about East LA. Most people loved to describe it as dangerous, even though most of them had never been there. I grew up visiting my cousins in the same area, and it was never as dramatic as people made it sound. These places just aren't scary to me. They're just neighborhoods where regular people live. I met Michael at my cousin's house party that summer. He had tattoos and looked edgy. When he asked me out, I said, yeah. I was flattered and curious as to what he would be like. He told me he knew a place with the best guava nectar in town and that we could go to a drive-in movie afterward. I actually laughed. I mean, I like guava nectar, but I had never heard anyone hype it up like that. But like I said, I was curious and agreed. He picked me up early one evening and he drove us to the drive-in first. He said we could leave the car there, walk to the restaurant, and come back for the movie. We even asked the employees if that would be okay. They said yeah, as long as we paid a small fee, which he did without issue. Something about the plan felt strange, though. The restaurant was about a 20-minute walk away, and the movie started at 9. It was already close to 8, so I asked him if it was smart to walk by ourselves so late. He smiled and said that he thought I wasn't afraid of the neighborhoods, since I had spent so much time in East LA growing up. He said it like a challenge. I remembered mentioning my lack of fear much earlier that day, and he used my own words to keep me from saying no. So I just went along with it. Very few people were on the street, and it was already dark. That should have been my first indicator that something wasn't right here. As we got closer to the restaurant, Michael stopped a few times to show me videos on his phone. They were silly clips that he thought were funny. I was uneasy about the walk, and it felt like Michael wanted it to last longer than it should have. Looking back with the feelings that I have inside of me now, I think Michael was just stalling. We're a block or two away from the restaurant at this point when a car pulls up beside us. In the blink of an eye, a masked man got out and walked towards us. For a second, I thought maybe this was just a prank, like for a YouTube video or something stupid like that. Then I heard this person speak. He said, "I need your phone and your wallet." I remember thinking that he sounded young, maybe high school age. He also sounded nervous and out of breath. I can't prove this, but all signs pointed to the fact that this was likely something that he hadn't done before. That was the only time that I'd ever been mugged, so I don't know what other muggers sound like, but I just know that the feeling I got was that this guy was new to this. I think he was hesitating. At one point, I even remember the driver yelling out, "Hurry up, man." He yelled back, "I am hurrying, bro. She's right here." He kept looking back at Michael. Michael would return his gaze. I couldn't see any face under the mask, but something in that moment told me that Michael knew this guy. He ended up taking my wallet and phone and then ran back to the car before they drove off. Michael stood still the entire time. He didn't help, but to be fair, I don't know what he could have done. You never know what someone with a gun might do if you make the wrong move. I was admittedly in shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened straight in front of my face. I told Michael that we should go to the police. He kept insisting that we should still go get that guava nectar, so I could have a minute to calm down. Dude, I'd just been robbed and he was offering me juice? I had no phone, no way to call anyone, and somehow we were still walking to get that guava nectar. We got it and walked back. Honestly, the least satisfying drink I've ever had in my life. When we finally got back to the car, I told him again that I wanted to go to the cops. This time, I said that if he refused, I would ask someone else in the parking lot to call. That's when he finally said okay. Once we got to the station, we gave our statements and it got even stranger. I said that the car was gray because I know what I saw. Michael said that it was white. I said there had been a driver who yelled, "Hurry up." Michael said there was no driver, that it was just one person who had hopped out and gotten back into the driver's seat of the car before driving off. He kept adding little changes. The officers were polite, but I could feel their patience thinning. When they realized we were giving them two entirely different stories, one of them sighed. She said she couldn't really investigate if the two people who were there couldn't agree on what actually had happened. I knew right then they weren't going to investigate this any further. Michael ended up driving me home. When my parents found out what had happened, they were furious. My mom told me to never talk to Michael again. She didn't need to repeat herself. Thankfully, I didn't lose much. My wallet was easy to replace, along with the $12 that was inside of it. In addition, I needed a new phone anyway. I've lived in East LA ever since that summer. 8 years later, and I've never had another bad experience here. The more I think about that night, the more I'm convinced that Michael planned it all out. I can still remember how he stalled to give them more time to come and mug me. I can still remember how calm he stayed throughout it all. I can still remember how he tried to give the police completely different information from what had actually happened. There's no way that was all an accident. Since then, I've seen Michael a few times at different things. He always wants to make small talk and invite me to things. But I keep my guard up, and I stick to my guns of never being alone with that person ever again. This happened to me during the summer of 2025 in El Centro, California. If you don't know, it's a quiet border town in the Imperial Valley, about 2 hours from San Diego and about 20 minutes from the Mexico border. From the outside, it's just another agricultural hub surrounded by desert and sky. Normal houses, construction sites, a few local shops. Very little about this little town seems unsafe. I'd been traveling through the Southwest, looking for a place to settle, and found a long-term, short-stay rental online. It was affordable, pet-friendly, and seemed perfect for my needs. My travel route was planned out so my family could track my stops, and each host knew when to expect me. The first place I stayed was in Brawley, about 15 minutes north of El Centro. The host was friendly and respectful. Nothing about them felt off. The unit itself was clean and quiet, though at night, a small encampment would appear around the corner and then disappear by morning. Well, one evening around 7 p.m., when the heat finally dropped below 100 degrees, I was able to take my dog for a walk. We're making our way up the street when a man in a car slowed down beside me, keeping pace with my strides for a few seconds, but without saying a word. Then, just as quickly as he had pulled up, he drove off. When I reached the corner store not long after, another man on a bike stopped and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you here before." I told him that I was visiting. After that one sentence, he just stared for a second before riding off. The next day, my host messaged me saying the other property that they owned, the one that I had originally wanted but had been booked for the time that I was here, was now available in El Centro. They offered me the chance to book it right then and there, so I agreed and I moved that day. What I didn't realize was that they transferred me without updating the reservation on the platform that I'd booked through. My account still showed the Brawley address, not the new one. It didn't feel right, but the host had been kind, so I convinced myself that this wasn't a big deal. The new place that I went to was a small detached home in a quiet residential area. After a few days there, I started noticing the normal patterns of the neighborhood. Who came and went, which cars parked where, things of that sort. But then there was this one car that just didn't fit. It would pull up across the street early in the morning, sometimes right when I stepped outside with my dog. It would sit there idling for a bit and then just pull off. I personally noticed this happen multiple times a week. At first, I thought it was someone resting or checking their phone, but the driver's side window had a towel pinned inside, which completely blocked my view of whoever was driving it. That's when my stomach started to knot. One morning, I managed to get a clear look at the license plate. I called the non-emergency police line, gave them the full number, and explained what was happening. The dispatcher said they'd look into it and try to make contact with the registered owner. Of course, like I'm sure you can guess, I never heard back. The officer that took the numbers down from me didn't seem particularly concerned, more like it was just another call to file away. A couple of days went by without seeing the car, but then it came back. It rolled up slowly in front of the house, made a U-turn in the middle of the road, paused, and the driver started texting while looking directly at my window. About 10 minutes later, a different car showed up, but did the exact same thing. That was it for me. I didn't call anyone, I didn't tell the host. I just quickly packed up everything I owned, loaded my car, and left before the sun went down. Now, maybe all this was a coincidence. Maybe I'm just paranoid when I'm off by myself. But then there was the chance that maybe I'm not making this up. Maybe there was somebody watching me. When I think about it now, I still get chills. Part of me feels like I wasn't supposed to be there. I'm going to share 2 comments and a single response from OP that were shared on this thread as well. These may provide a little further speculation or insight as to what was happening over this stretch of time. Commenter: in retrospect, now that you have the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, what do you think this was about? OP: I feel like it could have been my car, like they wanted to steal it. I know people have found ways to clone press to start, but I also felt like they could have been watching my patterns. As soon as I would come outside, they'd drive off. That's what weirded me out the most. Commenter number 2: when you were telling the story, theft isn't what came to my mind. Human trafficking was. If they wanted your car, that's not something that takes days of recon. They could have made off with it in 5 minutes if they were good. But seeing a young woman by herself, that leads me to think that it was something else entirely. I'm glad that you trusted your instincts enough to not sit back and find out. At the time of this story, I was 24 years old, same as my husband. Our daughter was 2. We were taking a road trip to visit family. Nothing extravagant, just a few hours and a couple 100 miles on the highway. Like always, before getting too far out of town, we stopped at this bigger gas station about 20 minutes from home. We do this purposefully because this gas station had a wider snack selection than most, so it's become our tradition stop before any long drive. It was the middle of summer, middle of the day, bright, hot, and busy, just your typical travel season crowd. My husband pulled up to a pump. I made my way out of the passenger seat and headed to the shop. As a designated snack selector, that was my job, all while he filled the tank and then pulled the car into a spot out front. Now, I didn't realize he'd moved the car because all the windows of the store were plastered over with posters and ads. This may be important for later. Inside, I grabbed my usual road trip snacks, sunflower seeds, corn nuts, gummy worms. I tucked those in one arm, while the other held our family water bottles. This gas station had one of those water fountains with a built-in bottle filler, but it was down a hallway that felt a bit more secluded than it probably was. There was only one cashier working, and the line was already long, so I figured I'd just pay first and fill the bottles up on my way out. No reason to get stuck behind even more people. I got in line with my arms full, and almost immediately, 2 guys stepped in behind me. I noticed them because they were tall, taller than me, and that's saying something, as I'm a woman that stands at about 5'10". They had to be 6'2", 6'3" at least, both wearing plain gray t-shirts and khaki shorts. Totally generic outfits, nothing that normally would have caught my attention. They weren't speaking English, and I couldn't fully place the language, although it sounded Middle Eastern. I only mention this because it contributes to the detail. They were Caucasian presenting, and there's a college town nearby with a lot of international students, so nothing about this on its face was alarming. That all stopped at their appearance. It was actually their behavior that set me off. Now, since having a daughter, I've become hyper aware of anyone being directly behind me. Even family sometimes makes me jumpy. So, like I usually do in public lines, I subtly turned my body so they were in my peripheral vision, and I pretended to browse the dollar toys on a nearby display. Normally when I do this, people don't really react. Most folks are too focused on their own errands to notice someone repositioning themselves, but these guys? Well, they moved with me. One of them was openly staring at me. He wasn't even trying to hide it, not even pretending to look around the store. He was dead on staring at me. His expression didn't quite match the environment either. I wouldn't say that it was angry exactly, just unsettling. I gave him a polite half smile and a quick nod, hoping to break the weirdness. Then I looked back at the toys, but I kept them in my field of vision the entire time. That's when they started whispering to each other. The store wasn't quiet, but the way they leaned in and kept their eyes on me made it feel like the conversation they were having was about me. I kept trying to talk myself down though, telling myself I was imagining it or overreacting. But then they shifted positions so they were directly behind me yet again. That became the pattern for the next 4 solid minutes. I know this because I checked my phone. Every time I moved an inch to the left or right, because I could feel them too close, they would move too. They'd pretend to examine the toys or candy, but I could tell they weren't actually looking at anything. This was all but confirmed when one of the guys picked up the same unicorn toy 4 different times, like he was using it as an excuse just to stand where I stood. The whole time, they didn't seem to look around the store once. Their eyes were either on me or on each other while they whispered. At that point, I knew I wasn't imagining it. My stomach was twisting into knots, and that primal "something is wrong" alarm was now going off full volume. I decided then and there I wasn't filling the water bottles. I would pay for my stuff and go straight out to the car. But the line wasn't moving. Some kind of issue with a membership card was holding everything up. Meanwhile, more people had filtered in behind the 2 men, including a middle-aged woman and her teenage kid, maybe 13 or 14. The woman noticed these men immediately. She saw their pacing, their whispering, the way they kept creeping up on me. She made eye contact with me for no more than half a second, and I think that's all it took for her to realize just how uncomfortable I was. She quietly sent her teen to check whether the self-checkouts were open. Those machines go down all the time, so it was always a toss-up. Meanwhile, the two guys behind me just kept inching closer. They were now close enough that I could feel their breath on my neck, likely intentional. One of them brushed against me while leaning toward a display of candy he clearly did not care about. I'd already moved as far forward as I could without literally pressing into the person in front of me. At this point, I had even thought about dropping the snacks right there and then and walking out without buying a thing. But that's when the teen returned and whispered something to the woman. That's when she immediately stepped forward. She didn't ask, didn't hesitate. She just took me gently by the arm and said, "Come on, let's go over here." It was casual enough that it didn't draw attention, but purposeful enough that I knew she was trying to help. We headed to the self-checkout together, and the whole time we scanned our items, she watched my back, and then I watched hers. When I looked up towards the main line, the two men were still staring directly at me, except now their expressions had completely changed. They weren't blank anymore. They wore that anger completely. It looked as if they were about to come over and confront me. But before they could move, the woman scooped up my bag and receipt and ushered me toward the exit. She was so smooth about it that I don't think her teen even realized anything was happening. Once we got outside, and I saw my husband and our car right there, I felt this huge wave of relief hit me. I thanked this woman, hugged her, and we went our separate ways without even exchanging names. When I got into the car, I explained everything to my husband. I tried to keep it factual so I wouldn't fall apart. He was just as freaked out as I was, especially hearing how persistent these men had been and how angry they looked when the woman had intervened. I filled our water bottles up at the next gas station instead, and honestly, this whole experience has stuck with me. We ended up moving out of the area about 6 months later for unrelated reasons, but I can't say I was sad to leave that gas station behind. If by some way in this wild world that woman sees this, I just want you to know that you're my hero. I don't think I can put into words just how terrified I was in that moment. I genuinely think that if I had walked to that water fountain by myself, down that secluded hallway, or if I were walking to my car by myself, that this story could have gone a much different direction. This happened about 15 years back now. I don't live in the United States, but I flew in to visit extended family for a reunion, which meant everyone had to scramble to find somewhere to stay. I stayed with my grandmother, who lived way up in the mountains. Beautiful area, but completely isolated. It's the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is technically close, but still a bit of a drive away. My brother and his wife didn't have a place lined up yet, and one of the men who lived near my grandmother, this long-haul trucker, offered to let them stay with him. He lived alone in a 3-bedroom house and said he'd be happy to let them use one of the spare rooms for free. It seemed generous, and my brother and his wife were grateful. I went with them to check the place out. From the outside, the house looked amazing. Big, well-kept, beautiful scenery. Honestly, I remember thinking I wish I could stay there too. We even joked about asking him if I could take the other spare room. That feeling evaporated the moment we stepped inside, though. The house was spotless. No clutter, nothing out of place. But it was the smell that hit us immediately. It was thick, clinging to the air. This mix of rotting meat, harsh chemical solvents, and a cheap air freshener, trying and failing miserably to mask it all. It was one of those smells that you can feel in the back of your throat. I remember thinking, how could a place look this clean, but smell that awful? The room my brother and his wife would be staying in was only accessible through a sliding glass door. The view outside was beautiful. Mountains, greenery, everything that you'd expect from the area. But the smell carried into that room too. And what made things worse was the door leading into the rest of the house. It had 2 locks on it, a deadbolt and a padlock. Not exactly locks that you'd see on rooms meant to protect valuables, the kind that looks like it's designed to keep someone inside. My brother asked about the locks, and the man just shrugged and said, "Oh, I have cats. I don't like them getting out. There are mountain lions and eagles around here. I wouldn't want to serve them up a free lunch." My brother later told me that he almost asked, "How big are your cats?" But something inside him held that comment back. When we wanted to see the kitchen, the man told us that we had to go back outside, walk around the house, and come in through a different door on the opposite end. That struck me as odd. Why couldn't we just walk through the house? Once inside the kitchen, he told my brother and sister-in-law they were welcome to use anything, appliances, food, whatever. While they were talking, I drifted toward the door that connected the kitchen to the living room. Sure enough, that one had the same setup, a deadbolt and a padlock, both locks on the inside. And from where I was standing, the smell was even stronger there. Despite all of that, the smell, the locks, the strange layout, my brother and his wife still stayed there for a week. They tried to spend as little time indoors as possible and only came back at night to sleep. My brother said the guy was weird, but he never got the impression anything sinister was going on. He probably just doesn't want to clean up after his cats, my brother told me. Cat food goes rancid fast and smells awful. And yeah, we did see the cats. Friendly, normal, and totally free roaming. One was even outside, which made the locked doors even more strange. I mean, if the goal was to keep the cats from escaping, they weren't doing a very good job. Still, and I'm happy to say this, nothing happened to my brother or my sister-in-law while they stayed there. So that in and of itself is a positive. Well, a couple years later, I visited my grandmother again, this time on my own. That same neighbor came by her house the first night I was there. After some casual conversation, he brought up my brother's previous visit. "Hey, I just want to apologize for how bad the house smelled back then," he said. "I want you to know it's all cleaned up now." He brought it up randomly, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't throw me off. That's because we had never mentioned to him the smell. Not once. Once I gathered my bearings, I told him he didn't need to apologize to me since I hadn't stayed there anyway. But he seemed fixated. "No, it wasn't good," he insisted. "I want you to see that it's all cleaned up now." I politely declined, but that only made him push harder. "You should come over and see it." He repeated this 3 or 4 times in the next few minutes. My grandma chimed in and insisted that I go, probably assuming he was just being polite or proud of his home. So, against my own better judgment, I went. He walked me through every single room, pointing out just how clean it was. The smell was indeed gone. So were the locks. The house otherwise looked normal. But he was overly complimentary toward me in a way that felt entirely out of place, as if he were overly eager for my approval, almost fawning over it. Something about this whole walkthrough made the hairs on my arms stand up. It didn't feel like hospitality. It felt purely performative. Once I made my way out the door, I had this shiver that I just couldn't shake. There was this other incident too, this time involving my niece. At one point during a previous family visit, this neighbor repeatedly tried to get her to come over to his house to see his private gym. He kept telling her, "You can ride my exercise bike. You can ride it as much as you want." I feel like that's a strange thing to say to someone. It's even more strange when you consider the fact that my niece was 8 years old. I told him that she was too small for a stationary bike, especially his. He immediately said, "Oh, I can adjust it." My niece at the age of 8 was a tiny human being, so I called him on it. I told him I'd be interested in seeing a stationary bike that adjustable. That's when he started to backpedal. "Oh, no. You don't need to see it. My house is far too messy anyway." Then he went straight back to asking her if she wanted to ride this exercise bike. When I brought it up to her mother, that's when he stopped. Although, had I not gotten another adult to listen in on what he was saying, I don't think that would have been the case. My grandmother passed away several years ago, and I miss her terribly. But I won't pretend that I miss having to deal with that man. To this day, I still have no idea what was going on in that house. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe just poor cat maintenance and a lonely man who didn't understand boundaries. But the locked doors, the smell, the insistence that I come to see the cleaned up house, the fixation on my niece, There are just some people you instinctively want to stay away from, even if you never learn exactly why that is. In December of last year, I, a female and 21 at the time, met Nick, male 22, on Hinge. I thought he was pretty handsome. He went to a good school for a D1 sport. Before we first met, he seemed incredibly respectful and asked many questions trying to get to know me. The first time we hooked up, though, was an odd experience. He asked me how I did on the SAT. He wouldn't stop complimenting me about my rosy cheeks. He put a used Zin in my mouth as we were making out, and stole my lighter as an excuse to return and obviously see me again. He also told me that he had lost tens of thousands of dollars gambling in the past. Obviously, and you're going to see this more in the story, my judgment was questionable. But I continued hooking up with him as I found him endearing, and he still seemed like a very sweet guy. He went to school in another city, so I saw him a few times over the next couple of months when he would come back to our hometown. That's when the red flag started to show. And in retrospect, I really should have dipped at that point. The third time we hung out, he asked to take me on a date, but was 2.5 hours late and brought me to a Blaze Pizza, where I watched him house an entire pizza as I just twiddled my thumbs. After the date, he confessed to me that he was an alcoholic. He underplayed it because I later found out he was a drug addict too. He claimed that he had become sober after a couple of stints in rehab during his freshman year of college. He told me a story about how he got one of his scars. Apparently, he was harassing a woman in a gas station parking lot in high school, and her boyfriend hit him. So he beat the guy up and escaped on his bicycle, but some random passerby pushed him off, leading to said scar. He also had a minor fit when he realized that I was wearing a coat made for men and had cut my hair shorter than when we had initially met. Eventually, we became exclusive and started dating. When I said yes to dating, he was so happy that he cried tears of joy. That night, he confessed to me that he came from a really, really wealthy family. We dated for about 6 months after that, and I was exposed to the depths of addiction and idiocy, especially surrounding money. These things were completely unimaginable to me. For example, he would book express Amtrak tickets upon arriving at the station instead of ahead of time, spending hundreds of dollars on each occasion. He would rack up $1,000 Uber bills on his family's account. His parents paid him $50 an hour to walk the dog, and he worked for a charity that his mom had set up, paying him another $30 an hour. But he was still somehow always broke. His mom would go back to school shopping for him and spend tens of thousands of dollars on really nice clothes. Clothes that he would never have an occasion to wear because the guy was functionally unemployed. He was a terrible boyfriend, overly demanding, very shady with other women, and incapable of taking no for an answer. He'd tell me many stories from his addict days, including when he tried meth that a drug dealer had given him as a free sample, when he'd lost over $20,000 getting scammed at a casino by a con man, or when he got robbed by a hooker and her pimp. I thought he was a changed man, but about 3 months into our relationship, that's when his gambling started again. I'd never seen a real addict in action, and it was mind-boggling. He would spend any time he could at the casino. He would be there all night, or leave his internship early to go in the afternoons. He rapidly started losing tons of money, but no one in his family realized, even though he lived with them. He would imply that he knew how much money was in my bank account, as well as the PIN on my card, and I knew that he owed people a lot of money, so I changed all of my codes. About 2 months later, his father's alcoholism became a major problem, and the dad was sent to rehab. My boyfriend then started drinking again himself. Within 2 weeks, he broke up with me and slept with another woman. I found that part out months later when he scrolled through a selfie he'd taken with her in his room the day that he broke up with me, and then tried to play it off. By the end of the relapse, he was drunk 24/7 and would call me up, threatening me and flexing his superior education on me. No one in his family had realized that he was drinking again, and I ended up telling his sister what had happened. Within 24 hours, they had sent him back to rehab, the same one that his dad was in, one that apparently ran $1,200 a night. Then the rehab center said that only the father or son could stay, but not both. Apparently, they're just not good influences on each other. Given the ultimatum and the fact that he was footing the bill, the dad decided that he would be the one to stay, kicking the son out to a much lower quality place. Eventually, my boyfriend got out of rehab and entered a halfway house, but I told him that I no longer wanted to be with him. That's when he left the halfway home and immediately showed up at my front door. He was pushing and prodding for me to stay with him, and I'll admit, I backed down. That is, until a few weeks later when I found out about the other woman, and also started to question a formal that he'd gone to 2 days before we started dating. When I ended things for good, he lost his mind. He threatened to email my nudes to my father and my job, threatened to file a police report if I didn't pay him $1,000 in cash to compensate him for any dates we'd ever gone on. Keep in mind, we usually went 50-50 on anything we did. He also threatened to have me institutionalized through the Marchman Act, which I later looked up and found out was only in Florida, a state that we don't live in. This guy was obsessed with the idea of me going to his friend's engagement party with him, and when I blocked him everywhere, including email, he messaged me through Spotify, threatening me if I didn't go with him. He also heavily implied that he'd put a hidden camera in my room and had also given me an STD. This was a crazy ride, one that I should have gotten off of much, much earlier than I did. And while I can look back and cringe at just how stupid I was, it does make for a good story. And there are 1,000 other, more entertaining aspects to it that I just don't have room for. Like him suing his school because he failed 2 classes from not turning in assignments, his obsession with the size of his younger brother's unit, and his crazy ex-girlfriend who harassed me throughout our entire relationship. Although, now understanding a bit more of the bullshit that he put her through, I think I have a better idea of where she was coming from. And look, I know we all make some questionable decisions in our younger years, and a lot of us are able to put those behind us and take the lessons from them to make us better people moving forward. I have no doubt that that's the case for myself, as I now know what red flags to look for and not ignore. But for him, I don't know if he possesses the ability to learn and grow from any of the experiences he's had in his life. He only knows how to double down and blame others for his own shortcomings. I have real empathy for the next woman that he tries to take down with him. I want to start this off by saying I don't know if I was actually in any danger when this happened, but for years, it's lived in the back of my mind. I wasn't sure where else to share this, so I'm hoping that this is the right place. June 5th, 2015. It was an ordinary weekday, and my kids had just finished one of their last days of the school year. They were 6 and 7 back then, still at the age where having a gift card feels like winning the lottery. They'd each been given a Toys R Us gift card for their birthdays, so that's where we headed after school. The outing was supposed to be a treat for them, something small and fun just for us. We ended up walking around the store for far longer than I expected. As I've come to learn, that's what kids always do. They agonized over Pokemon cards, argued about colors of blow pops, and proudly carried their little treasures to the checkout. Everything felt normal, completely routine up to this point. Once outside, I helped them into the back seat like I always did. They were buckling in, chattering about their cards, sugar already kicking in, I'm sure of it. I was barely in the driver's seat when a blue Pontiac Montana van pulled in front of us fast and stopped directly in front of my car, blocking me in so tightly that I couldn't move forward an inch. At first, I thought it was someone being careless or maybe waiting for another spot. This annoyed me enough that I remember rolling my eyes, but I never even considered honking my horn or doing anything more. That's when the driver's side door of this van flew open. A man climbed out and started walking toward my window, seemingly with a purpose. Before he even reached me, something in my body reacted, that internal mom alarm. I made sure all the doors were locked and my children's windows in the back weren't down. From a glance, this man didn't seem inherently dangerous, but these are the types of feelings as a parent that you don't really ignore. As he got to my window, he knocked on it. I wasn't going to open my door up. I cracked the window, but less than an inch, only enough to hear what he was saying. He leaned down, and that's when I first got a good, clear look at him. Mid-40s maybe, unkempt, missing several teeth. That's the detail burned into my memory. That smile, or whatever it is that you'd call the shape that his mouth made. He started firing off rapid-fire questions about my car, how much it cost, where I bought it. All of this completely out of nowhere with no introduction. His tone wasn't even conversational. It was probing, seemingly like he was reading off of a script, but one that he didn't fully know his lines from. When apparently I wasn't being cooperative enough with his line of questioning, this man held up a USB thumb drive between two fingers. It had a homemade handwritten label taped to it, with my name on it. I had never seen that drive before, nor had I ever seen this man before. But he launches into this speech about how there were 24 hours of photos and footage on it, that he'd be sending it to the RCMP, and that I would never see my kids again if I didn't go with him right now to, quote, clear things up. I remember my brain pulling overtime trying to catch up to his words. I asked if he was joking, not because I thought he was, but because I genuinely couldn't process what was happening. That's when his whole demeanor shifted. His voice sharpened. He snapped, "Don't play dumb," and repeated that I needed to go with him right then. As he's threatening me, he even rattled off my daughter's name as he talked, casually, like it was nothing. And that nearly made me sick. It snapped me out of whatever haze I may have been in, and I grabbed my phone and started dialing 911. That's when this man hesitated. He reached toward his own pocket, as if to pull out his own phone, and said, "Oh, I can do that too." But when he realized I was actually calling and not just bluffing, something changed in his face. Panic maybe, or more likely anger. I'm not really sure. That's when he walked back to his van, and as he pulled off quickly, I could see him talking on his phone. It seemed urgent. That's when I noticed something that I hadn't before. There was a gray truck that had been sitting behind me, also blocking me in, and they left at the exact same time as this man. I stayed on the line with 911. I told them what had just happened. They said that officers could come, but because the man was no longer on the scene, it would be about an hour. I told them to meet me at my house instead. I no longer felt safe sitting in that parking lot. When the police eventually arrived at my house, the whole interaction felt off. They acted like I was confused, exaggerating, or maybe just overly dramatic. One officer made a comment that felt dangerously close to accusing me of wasting their time. As you can imagine, nothing ever happened with this report. No follow-up, no speaking with any detectives down the line. Just nothing. That dismissal, after something that had terrified me to my core, added a whole different layer of fear. My father, frustrated on my behalf, helped me look into a few things afterward, and here's what we found. That gray truck had been parked behind me when the van blocked the front. I hadn't noticed in the moment because I was too focused on my kids and my own safety. Both vehicles left the parking lot in sync, all but confirming that they were working in tandem. My email account had been hacked that same morning. I'm not sure if that's relevant or if it happened by chance, but it certainly adds a layer to all of this. But this following element, I think this is the most damning. I learned after the fact that when I bought my car, the dealership that I had bought it from had posted a photo of me and my children standing in front of it to their Instagram. The post listed all of our names. The license plate on the car was fully visible, and this post was completely public. Now, I don't know how many of those things are all connected, but I also don't believe in coincidences like that. For a long time, this messed me up. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible almost happened or was meant to happen, and I only narrowly slipped away from it. Sometimes when I retell this story, people ask what the man wanted, or what the footage could have been, or why he thought threatening me would work in broad daylight with 2 kids in the car. But honestly, I don't think I want the answers to those questions. What I know is this. None of this felt like a prank. It certainly didn't feel random, especially with the things that he knew about me. This felt like an attempted kidnapping, or extortion, or something else far beyond what I was prepared to understand in the moment. Even now, I still don't know what would have happened if I had opened my door that day, if I'd rolled the window down farther, if I hadn't picked up the phone and called 911 right then. And I'm grateful every day that I didn't have to find out. I, a 30-year-old female, had one of the most terrifying stalking experiences about 12 years back. I was 18 years old at the time, and the Great Gatsby movie with Leonardo DiCaprio had just been released. Being really young, inexperienced in life, and rather naive about how to remain safe with unwanted attention, I made every mistake in the book with the guy that started stalking me. I had just graduated high school and took a job at a health food store in my downtown area. It was my first customer service job. The owner was this big hippie, easy to work with and flexible with hours. At first, I worked different shifts, eventually taking the afternoon to close hours. Due to just how small the store was, there were shifts where I was alone without other coworkers, only our owner sporadically dropping by to grab items off the shelf for her personal use, then leave after 30 or so minutes. As a side note, our store was situated next to a building that had subsidized housing for those recently released from incarceration or low income. The evening nighttime hours were risky for young women to be out without a male escort. Every restaurant in the downtown had staff that escorted girls to their cars, as it was common to be followed with assaults happening after dark. I was on edge during those closing shifts, but felt some reassurance as I had parking immediately outside our back exit, just a few feet from the door. But I was in the store closing out the register, cleaning and locking up every night alone. The front of the store was where the cash register was set up, but your back was to the large window that was right next to the sidewalk. The register faced the inside of the store. It wasn't uncommon for me to feel people watching me and catch creepy guys looking at me through the window right behind where I was standing. Again, young and inexperienced, I didn't voice my fears or report the randos that would be a foot away watching me, only separated by that glass window. I picked up a shift during the summer farmers market in the morning. It was a great day. I was so happy to work in the morning and have a higher flow of customers. One guy that came in, I'll call him Cam, came into the store with a brochure for a local event at a spiritual center in the downtown area. I was cordial, smiling, and got permission for us to post it at our register. This guy was obviously high. Nothing crazy though, and he looked like a chill individual. You could tell he was in his own reality. Only talked to him for about 5 minutes. I didn't think much of the encounter and just moved on with my day. Well, next shift, Cam comes back into the store. He strikes up conversation and was trying to keep my attention. Again, working in the afternoon when we maybe had 2 or 3 people come in before close, he just hung out right at the register. I was trying to give hints that I needed to focus on work, but he would just follow me around the store while commenting on how gorgeous my legs were and that he thought I had been an angel the last time he saw me. He kept telling me he had a spiritual awakening because I had shown him interest with how nice I was, insisting I was flirting, and that the sun behind my head made my hair glow like a halo. Again, gonna keep repeating this part. Young and not experienced with guys. I was equally creeped out, but also a little flattered because I never had that kind of attention. I thanked him for the compliments. Didn't call out that they were inappropriate. Just made the same excuse that I needed to focus and walked away. But as had become the usual in this conversation, he just shadowed me everywhere I went, watching me, but not really talking anymore. I was starting to get really freaked out. I let him know that he was loitering and he needed to leave unless he was there to shop. Given how pricey the items were, I figured that would deter him. He ended up using his food stamps to buy 1 soda and a piece of candy every hour. Maybe $2.50, $3 spent every hour. He used that to make the excuse that he was a customer. I went to the bathroom to at least get some privacy. My boss had seen him hanging out in the store before, but never commented. I called her and told her I was getting scared by this guy. Let her know that he was making an excuse to stay in the store by buying 1 cheap item and insisting that he was a customer throughout my whole shift. I really thought she'd give me support, and come down to the store personally. She was a self-proclaimed feminist that was high on consent and boundaries. So I got major whiplashed when she defended his presence. She told me the store was in the red and on the brink of needing to close. Because he was spending any money, I shouldn't try to push him out of the shop. I tried to argue that he wasn't generating significant sales, but she just doubled down that money was money, and then insisted that I was overthinking it, and Cam was just this kind soul that had found a similar soul bond with me that created positive energy within the store. Just what the So roadblock there. All I could do was carry on. The idea of quitting my job didn't even cross my mind. Being my first job, I was worried that it would look bad if I left after only a couple of months. It was really hard to find local positions that were flexible with school hours, and I would be starting my first semester at the local college soon. Things started to slowly escalate from there. Cam started bringing me flowers every day. He'd leave long notes confessing his love and insisting that we were soulmates. Then he'd randomly play the Great Gatsby soundtrack. He would go on and on telling me that he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. We were destined to be together, and that my denial of our bond was just like Gatsby's attempts to get Daisy. We were living out the movie, but our ending would be the coming together of souls wrapped in passion. He had this crazed look in his eyes every time he brought it up. Then he just started plainly calling me Daisy. Anytime another customer would come in, he would get angry and jealous that I quickly ignored him and walked away. He started calling himself my bodyguard and told me that it was his duty to beat anyone up that looked at me wrong or made a pass at me that would be a threat to our love. Again, I want to emphasize I was so stupid for not quitting this job or telling anyone else about this. It's an understatement that I was a complete dumbfuck for not making police reports, documenting things, creating boundaries, leaving my job, or telling my friends, parents, and coworkers. For a few weeks, Cam didn't show up. I thought there would finally be a break, or maybe he lost interest. Then he showed back up, only to tell me that he had been hospitalized. Great. Same routine started all over again. Well, one day, I get a text from an unknown number. I learned shortly thereafter that it was Cam. Not only did he get my number from a coworker, who he lied to, saying that he had a new phone and had lost my number, but he did a reverse search and found my address. He didn't have transportation, and I was on the other side of town. We didn't have a bus system, and it was way too far to walk. As far as I know, he never came to my house. But if I think about it too long, part of me thinks that he did, and I just wasn't aware of it. I didn't block his number. Again, chalk that up to being dumb. But honestly, I was scared to, because he now knew where I lived and was so entrenched in this idea that we were bound to each other that I thought things would escalate more. I either ignored his texts or made dumb excuses for not responding. I'd be curt. He wouldn't take the hint. When I started my semester at school, it got worse again. He formed a group of friends and told me that he'd introduce them. First, he wanted me to go to his apartment. When I insisted that I wouldn't, he brought this group of friends to the store. I stupidly thought that they were nice people, but they sided with him, saying that he was a really nice guy and I should just give him a chance. Told me that he was just melodramatic and liked playing out fantasies, but he wasn't a bad guy. A few days later, Cam told me that he was worried about my safety with the darker evenings. He said he'd have his friends posted outside the front and back of the store to make sure that I was safe. And they did. Dude, that was freaky as fuck. Growing up in a household filled with abuse, I again didn't register the danger of the situation. I was accustomed to bad things happening to me and was still stuck in a compliance, submissive response mode. This pattern of behavior didn't make me fight the setup. They started bringing in more deliveries of gifts to me from Cam, and the 5 of them now loitered in the store with Cam during my shifts, each of them buying a single item every hour to remain customers. It was now getting too scary. 6 guys in the store, me alone, young female. Exits being blocked by them as they insisted they were my bodyguards who would watch the doors. My nightly habit became kicking them out, locking the store and finishing my work in the dark so they couldn't see me inside, and then staying in the building for 2 additional hours so they'd just go away. That worked for a whole week. Then one night I stepped out the door and all of them were either leaned against the wall by the exit door or leaning on my car smoking and drinking. Cam came out and tried to hug me with his buddies whooping in the background. He stank of alcohol and weed. I honestly thought they were going to grab me and force me to the apartment. I made my car alarm go off, and it scared them enough that I was able to jump in, lock the doors, and floor it out of the parking lot. At that point, I didn't give notice. I just told the owner I was done. And I still didn't tell anyone about what had happened. Cam kept trying to text me, told me I was denying our destiny, and he wasn't going to give up on us. I stopped responding. Then I blocked his number. But then he'd get new numbers and text again. His texts slowly got more threatening as I ignored him. I started hearing cars drive by at odd hours of the night, and he would text to let me know that he was still my dedicated protector and was making sure I was safe. It was obvious one of his buddies was giving him rides to snoop at my house. All of a sudden, it all stopped. Radio silence. And for 6 months, I was relieved because nothing else came. But then one night, a random phone call from another unknown number. I was in group chats with other students for projects and thought that it was maybe one of them calling me, but it was Cam. He told me that he had violated his parole and was in jail the last 6 months. He said that he thought of me every day. I was his daisy and he was going to come for me. We would finally be together and he'd prove to me we had an undeniable love. He was a bit more graphic about other things that he told me he also thought about every day in jail. I was just as pale as a ghost and speechless. All I could think was to fake a story about going abroad for studies in 2 weeks. He started screaming at me for running away from our connection. He'd find me and come after me no matter where I went. I just hung up the phone. I trashed it. Got a new phone with a new number. I deleted just about all my social media and finally moved to a large city about an hour away. I had to upend my entire life because of this piece of trash, and I was so inexperienced and naive that I only know now how many mistakes I made. I was just glad that the worst case scenarios never played out, and it was a steep learning curve that taught me how to protect myself in the future. This wasn't the last of my weird encounters, though. I feel as if I could write a whole book given the chance, but rather than take up more of your time with those, I'll just leave it at this. With no shortage of creeps out there, sometimes it really sucks to be a woman. There's a woman in my building who hides from me every time I do laundry. I think something's wrong. I happen to live in an apartment complex that has a shared laundry room down in the basement. You get to the basement through a door from the stairwell. On one side, there's a hallway with basement apartments. On the other side, that's where you'll find the laundry room. The hallway is where I first saw this woman about 3 years back when I first moved in. I went to do my laundry one day, and when I stepped into the hallway and waited for the light to come on, I saw a dark figure with long hair slipping into one of the door frames for a split second. I felt like my blood just about froze, but I told myself that I'd only imagined her from already feeling creeped out. I told my boyfriend about it later, and a few weeks later, he said that he'd seen her too. From then on, I saw her every now and then. The encounters were creepy, but I kind of came to expect them and tried my best to ignore her. I figured that to be the polite and empathetic response, at least so to speak, since she clearly didn't want to be seen. I suspected her to have some sort of phobia. Sometimes I'd see her in the hallway and sometimes she'd already be inside the laundry room, quickly getting behind a wall when I entered. Then I'd hear her leave quietly while I was leaning over my washing machine, even leaving her things behind. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was alone down there, figuring that she'd surely sometimes hide successfully. One time, this woman crouched behind a washer waiting for me to leave. I took that as her getting more comfortable with me, as strange as that sounds. That was my creepiest encounter until one night, I found a key in the garage. I wanted to post a note about it at the main entrance of the building, and did so on my side. I wanted to post another one at the entrance of the other building that shares the garage. You can get there through the basement, which is also shared. When I entered the hallway, I saw this woman on the other end, but she quickly closed the door as always, disappearing back into the stairwell of the other building. I was already feeling uneasy, but still walked towards that door, note in hand. When I entered the stairwell of the other building and the lights came on, I didn't see her, so I thought she'd gone back inside her apartment or something. I left the door open thinking I'd be back in a minute. I went up one set of stairs towards the entrance, and as the stairs made a turn, I looked back down and saw her standing there all of a sudden inside the hallway that I'd just come out of, in complete darkness. She stood behind the door and had it closed just enough that I could only see her face. She stared at me through dark sunglasses, a blank expression on her face, and didn't pull back at all this time. She didn't even seem to flinch. She must have stood behind that door on the other side as I went through it, and then quickly gotten inside right behind me. We must have been so close to each other for a few seconds, and it's the longest that I've ever had the chance to look at her. I'm not really proud of my response, but I panicked a little bit and ran up the remaining stairs out of the building. I had to walk around my entrance in the rain wearing only slippers. Since that day, I'm not so sure about her not wanting to be noticed anymore. I kind of feel like if that were the case, it wouldn't happen all the time, right? She'd hear someone coming and already hide or leave instead of waiting for them to come in and see her for a moment. She also didn't need to watch me at all. She could have just shut the door behind her and I would have been none the wiser. I mean, it seems as if so far she's completely harmless, but I don't get her, and I can't help but feel vaguely threatened by her. I feel bad about it, but all the crouching, sneaking, hiding, waiting and watching now has a rather distinct predatory feel to it. I don't know. Part of me is here posting this because I want to know what you guys think. Am I the crazy one? Or is something else going on here? I'm going to read 3 of the top comments from this original post, but as always, I'm interested in what you guys happen to think about this one. She seems completely harmless, eh? Well, clearly she's not. This is not normal behavior and sounds very much like someone who's suffering from a significant mental illness. I would be careful in future encounters with her, and I sure as hell wouldn't be alone in the basement with her. Is it possible that this woman doesn't belong in the building at all? Like, have you considered that she might be homeless and somehow squatting? I certainly wouldn't discount the mental illness element, as the two things often go hand in hand. But this feels strange enough that what I'm suggesting might just make the most logical sense. This woman might be someone with anthropophobia, which is a fear of people. It could explain her always being in the dark or disappearing quickly. It's possible she lives in one of those cellar apartments that you alluded to. The way in which she appears to be less fearful of you might be because of how often she sees you. Just so you know, if that's the case, it's a disability. It's still very creepy though. I'm a guy in my late 20s who typically ends up going out with a group of women. Not because I'm trying to be anyone's protector or anything like that, it's just the dynamic I've always had with my closest friend Lauren. We grew up together, and through her, I became friends with 2 of her coworkers, Maya and Tessa. When they all go out, I tend to go out too. I seem to be the built-in guy in the group, and honestly, it's helped me get more comfortable around women too, so I never exactly minded it. The night that I'm going to talk about, we were all back in our hometown and decided to hit one of the college bars that we used to go to. Lauren ended up leaving early with someone that she met there, so it was just me, Maya, and Tessa for the rest of the night. I'd say that we were buzzed, but we were far from sloppy. You know, just having a normal night out. Well, at some point after midnight, 3 people that we hadn't seen before started to drift towards us at the bar. It was a woman and 2 men. If I'm being real here, it was the woman that caught our attention first, mostly because of how she carried herself. Short hair, clean fade, button-down shirt, boots. She looked sharp, confident. Masculine presenting, obviously, but not in an aggressive way. Just seeming like the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately has people's eyes on them. The 2 guys with her, they didn't talk much. They were bigger than me, both of them. Broad shoulders, quiet, and they barely cracked a smile. I don't remember them drinking, which almost made this whole thing weirder, seeing as it took place in a bar. They gave off this stiff, unreadable vibe that made me pay a little bit more attention than usual. At first, everything seemed normal. The woman started talking to Maya, bought her a drink, and they danced a little bit. It wasn't anything more than just a little bit of fun, but I stayed nearby because Maya's phone had died earlier, and Tessa's was on its last legs, so I was keen on keeping the group together. At around closing time, when the bar started clearing out, that's when the tone and mood just sort of shifted. The woman invited us to an after party for one of the guys' birthdays, except her invitation really wasn't an invitation. It was more like she kept repeating it, and she wouldn't accept maybe or we're heading home as answers. Maya and Tessa were drunk enough that obviously they weren't thinking clearly, and because they didn't want to be rude, neither one of them really put their foot down about what our plans were afterwards. I didn't like the situation, and by the minute, my gut was feeling more and more twisted about it. We gave excuses, saying that we were looking for our friend, and we couldn't leave without her. I'd hoped that they would drop it after that, but the woman just said, "Oh, she's fine. We saw her leave hours ago." Something about the fact that they knew our friend had left before they even made contact with us made me tense up. Still, the girls were wavering, sitting on the fence about what we were going to do, and somehow we ended up walking towards the parking lot behind the bar with these 3 people guiding the way. That's when my discomfort really kicked in. I was walking between the 2 girls. I think I was even holding Tessa's hand at this point, mostly trying to keep us together. That's when one of the guys looked down, saw our hands, and said, "Bro, let them do what they want." The other one chimed in, "Yeah, man, why are you being so protective?" Their tone wasn't friendly ribbing. I mean, how could it be? I just met these people an hour ago. It was more annoyed. We reached a small white SUV parked near the back. The door on the passenger side was already opened up, and inside was some random guy that we hadn't seen before. He wasn't in the bar with us. This guy also didn't greet us, didn't say a word, just stared ahead the entire time. Every muscle fiber within me tightened. There was no music playing from the car, no signs that it was headed to a party, and even more, there were no extra seats. I mean, as I look back, I don't know what the plan exactly was trying to get all of us into that car. We would have been sardines. But that didn't stop them from trying to usher Tessa and Maya into the back of that vehicle. That's when I stepped back and quietly told the girls, "There's no room. We should just leave." That's when the line started. "What are you so worried about? Just come have some fun. We'll pay for your Uber back. Let them make their own choices. You really think we're not trustworthy? Hey bro, you're invited too, but you need to relax." Everyone was talking over each other, and it seemed like they were trying every angle imaginable. The girls were still polite about declining, a little bit more straightforward this time, but you could tell that they were uncomfortable. I could see it on their faces. That's when I decided to put my foot down. I started repeating, "No, we're going home. We're good." When, completely out of nowhere, the Studley woman walked straight up to me and punched me straight in the eye. This wasn't a slap. It was a full-on, closed-fist punch. It stunned me enough that everything around me went quiet for a second. Now my first instinct was to swing back, but those 2 big guys were right behind her, and I knew that the numbers in this fight wouldn't be on my side. At that point, I shifted, and all I could focus on was getting us out of there. I turned, pushed the girls in front of me, and said, "Walk," as we started heading towards the street. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and frantically pulled up Uber, trying to get a car here as quickly as possible. The group followed us. I want to say not aggressively at first, but after someone punches you in the eye, anything they do to try to stay close to you is aggressive. That kept my adrenaline up. In their pursuit, they were still trying to get Maya and Tessa to stay with them. One of the guys even pulled out a $50 bill, told me that he'd give it to me if I got in an Uber alone and let the girls stay and have fun. I refused. The girls were still talking, obviously trying to placate the group. "I've got an early shift in the morning. My dad'll kill me if I don't get home. We've had a long day." Pretty much whatever came to mind. But I was done talking. I knew that it wasn't going to make any sort of difference. When we crossed paths with our Uber, it felt like our only lifeline that night. We got Maya in first, then Tessa, then me. And before we could close the door, one of the men had already leaned down and was trying to convince the driver to let the two women ride with them instead. He even offered this man money. I told the driver, "We're not getting out. Please drive." That's all the driver needed. He took off. The second we pulled away, you could hear a pin drop in the back of that car. After a few minutes, I look over and I see Maya, and she's breaking down. I think Tessa may have noticed right around the same time because she started in kind. It wasn't a loud type of crying, but that shaky release when your body realizes that you're safe after a sketchy situation. We made it back to my place and the girls crashed here with me. It was clear that they didn't want to be by themselves. The next morning, once all the alcohol had worn off, they kept saying how wrong the whole situation felt looking back on it. And honestly, I agreed. I still do. I don't know what those people actually had planned, whether it was an actual after party or what, but I know that we shouldn't have been anywhere near that SUV. I don't feel like I did anything heroic. Actually, quite the opposite. I got punched in the eye and I didn't do anything back. But I listened to my gut, knew that things didn't seem right, and I kept the girls close. I think that's one of the major contributing reasons that we all made it home safely that night. This happened back in 2018, during my second year of university, and I was 20 at the time. For context, I lived in a government-owned student apartment building on the 3rd floor. My little sister lived right next door to me, which made things a bit easier, because I have a disability. When I was 13, an accident basically left my right leg useless. It's something that I deal with constant pain surrounding. In fact, if I weren't on medication, I'd be bedridden most days. At the time, I was only about 6 months into taking prescribed morphine twice a day, and it was still hitting me pretty hard. It helped me move around, sure, but it also made me foggy, dizzy, paranoid, and a bit slow to react. I'd even been dealing with hallucinations, although most of those were of the auditory type. So that's where I was physically when all this happened. One night, I made the rare decision to go out with friends to the center of the city. I'll be honest, I didn't go out much at that time, maybe once every couple months, because alcohol is off limits with morphine, and standing or walking for long periods hurts, even when you're on medication. But my friends wanted to hang out, and I didn't want to miss everything fun. Around this time, there were rumors floating around our university about a group going around trying to kidnap students. 2 girls had already gone missing, and people kept mentioning a blue van. My friends and I honestly didn't know what to believe. I mean, rumors spread fast online. Then we weren't convinced that any threat was real, or at least not convinced about the blue van part being real. Anyway, by midnight, I was exhausted and hurting so badly that the edges of my vision were starting to blur. My last bus for the night came at midnight, so I left early to make sure that I didn't miss it. If I did, it meant having to call my sister to pick me up because there was no way I could walk 20 minutes home in that condition. I took a fast-acting morphine pill before getting on the bus, just to survive the walk from the stop back to my building. The problem is, those pills hit like a brick. They make you loopy and sleepy within half an hour if you're not lying down. When I got off the bus, I could barely focus on anything except the pain and the fog settling over my head. The street itself was quiet. The usual rows of parked cars around the government housing blocks, pretty normal. I started my 5-minute walk home. As I passed the parking lot, I noticed a movement out of the corner of my eye. But because hallucinations weren't unusual for me at the time, I ignored it. Then the streetlights reflected on a car window, and for whatever reason, that made me look. I saw an old beat-up white car with a middle-aged man sitting in the driver's seat. He was just sitting there, clearly awake, staring out the windshield. That struck me as odd, but I was so out of it that I kept walking. At that point in the night, I couldn't afford to stop. Every ounce of energy I had was going into putting one foot in front of the other. Then I heard an engine start behind me, and something in me woke up instantly. I had told myself that I was being paranoid. Morphine does that. But my heart jumped. I saw my shadow stretch long on the pavement as headlights came up from behind me. I did a quick calculation as best as I could in my head. I was about 300 meters from my building. I needed my student ID to open the first door. That door opened painfully slowly. Then I needed a key to get into my actual building. And I could barely walk, let alone run. And that's when the panic really started to kick in. The car didn't pass me. It slowed down to match my walking speed. I didn't turn around. I didn't want them to know that I'd noticed. But I could see movement inside the car. It was more than one person now. Someone in the passenger seat, as well as movement in the back. I kept my earphones in, even though I wasn't playing music, and focused on just walking straight ahead. My leg felt like it was on fire. Tears started falling because of the pain, but also because I knew just how vulnerable I was at that moment. That's when they called out to me. I heard the voices, but I couldn't make out the words. Whether because of the meds or the fear, I can't really say. I just kept walking. When my building finally came into view, I took off my backpack and dug frantically through the front pocket for my student ID. My hands weren't even working right. I couldn't feel my fingers properly. I was shaking so badly that the card kept slipping from my grip. I stepped onto the wheelchair ramp leading to the door, still searching my bag. That's when the car suddenly jerked to a stop right next to the ramp, and the doors flung open immediately. That sent me into pure survival mode. I don't know how, because I swear I was about to faint, but I managed to run the last couple steps to the door. I slapped my ID on the reader and begged the door under my breath to hurry up. The door creaked open just enough for me to squeeze through, and as soon as I slipped inside, I slammed it shut behind me. The people that had leapt out of the car, they hit that door hard. I heard the thud of it. I heard them yelling at me through the glass. I didn't want to listen though. I staggered toward the interior entrance, shaking so badly that I almost dropped my keys, before finally making my way inside the building. Once the door shut behind me, my entire body gave out. I collapsed on the floor and had the worst panic attack of my life. Once I finally got myself together, I crawled, literally crawled, up 3 flights of stairs to my sister's apartment. We had spare keys for each other's apartment, just in case I ever had to find my way over there during a bad pain day. I woke her up, shaking and crying. I told her everything. She said later that I looked pale enough to pass out. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end. About 3 weeks later, my sister called me late at night while walking home, breathless and panicked. She had seen the exact same car waiting in the same parking lot near the bus stop. She didn't stop to check who was inside, even though she saw people. She just ran for it. I took that as my cue to head down to the interior door and hold it open for her from the inside, just in case. As she made it inside, there was that same white car pulling up a few seconds behind her. After that, we warned everyone, our building, university groups, anyone that would listen. We gave the details to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless they caught the men in the act. They did confirm that what we described matched other reports that they'd received, and the rumors that had been going around campus. I didn't personally see that car again during the rest of my degree, but stories like mine kept popping up in other parts of the city. Seemingly the same patterns, same descriptions. Even now, years removed from this, I still think about how close it came, and how little I could have done if they'd actually grabbed me before I reached that door. I still live in the same town as my university, so that means I still pass that bus stop at night sometimes. And each time, I feel my stomach drop, like my body remembers something that my mind actively tries not to replay. I guess that's what happens when you realize just how quickly your ordinary life can change for the worse. I was freshly 11 when this happened, so please bear with me in the way that I understood things back then. My parents were really strict growing up, and my mom was the driving parent of this. She had this rule about not letting me sleep over at houses where older men were around. And unfortunately, all of my friends had dads and/or brothers. At the time, I thought it was ridiculous. We lived in Canada. All my other friends were able to have sleepovers. It just felt like one more cultural difference from her growing up in a conservative Muslim household. But something about it went deeper than culture for her. This extended to houses where male relatives might be. Cousins, uncles. I didn't get it. I felt like I was missing out. So when my best friend Emma invited me to stay over, I begged on my knees to be allowed to go. I told my mom that she knew Emma's parents. She knew her little brother, knew exactly where I'd be. My mom initially said no, but my dad eventually talked her down, and she finally agreed to it. I remember feeling like I'd won the lottery. The night of the sleepover, Emma, her younger brother Justin, and I were all outside playing in the snow, plotting on how we were going to go play video games in the living room. I remember being flushed and happy, still catching my breath, when I noticed someone watching us through a top-floor window. It was a young-looking man, maybe late 20s, early 30s, someone that I'd never seen Emma with before. I asked her who that was. "Oh, that's my stepdad's younger brother," she said. "He's visiting us from Los Angeles." Immediately, I thought this was the coolest thing ever. Someone from California? In our little tiny town? I pestered her with questions about him. She mentioned offhand that he had gotten into a lot of trouble back home. But at 11 years old, that just sounded like something out of a movie. Later that night, when we sat down for dinner, he joined us. He chose to seat next to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when he immediately started showering me with compliments, telling me how sweet I was, how cute I looked, even reaching over and pinching my cheeks. I thought it was embarrassing, but I didn't think that it was wrong. Only now do I recognize the looks that Emma's parents exchanged. The tiny coughs, the way they tried to interrupt him without making a scene. At the time, I didn't understand why they looked so uneasy. Now it's very clear. After dinner, Emma and I hung out in her room recording silly Vine videos and reading creepypastas. Eventually, we crashed in her bed. This was exactly the sleepover that I'd imagined at that age. Well, sometime in the middle of the night, not exactly sure when, I woke up needing to pee. Normally at home, I'd just take myself to the bathroom half asleep, but I remember feeling strangely nervous about walking down their long, unfamiliar hallway in the dark. As my bladder filled, I finally worked up the courage and went to the bathroom. On my way back, I heard movement coming from one of the rooms, but I just brushed it off. Whether it was Emma's parents, Justin, whatever. At that point, I had honestly forgotten all about the uncle. That is, until I saw him. He was standing at the end of the hall. It was just a shadow at first, but it was definitely him. And he was now gesturing for me to come over. Because I was 11 and didn't want to be rude or get in any sort of trouble, I actually did. When I got close, he smiled and said, "I thought it was you. Why are you awake at this hour?" Even at 11, something about that made my stomach turn. But before I could say anything, he reached out and gently stroked one of the curls on my head. He asked if I wanted to come see some pictures in his room. I remember this so clearly. It didn't occur to me that it was dangerous. It just felt off. Like I wasn't supposed to. Like I'd get grounded forever if my mom found out that I'd gone into a grown man's room alone. I told him I wasn't sure if I was allowed. He scoffed. "Allowed? Who do you need permission from?" He said it like he was teasing, but there was something else underneath. I laughed nervously, that automatic, polite kid reaction. The whole time, though, my gut was screaming that I needed to get away from this guy. But that's when he took my hand. He didn't hurt me, but it was clear that he had intention. Enough to pull me a step closer toward the guest room that he was in. This made me freeze. And that's when Emma's little brother, Justin, opened his own bedroom door. He was awake gaming, and he must have heard something coming from the hallway through his headphones. He looked right at me and said my name. "You should go back to bed. My parents don't like when people are up late." His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm enough to break whatever hold the uncle had on me at the moment. I immediately moved back towards Justin, then slipped into Emma's room. Before I shut the door, I looked back into the dark hallway. That's when I saw the uncle just standing there, staring at me while standing completely still. I barely slept after that. The next morning, though, no one mentioned anything. Justin didn't even look at me in a way that suggested we shared some secret. But I do remember him treating his uncle coldly, almost ignoring him completely. Emma, she didn't notice anything wrong. I don't really think her parents did either. And me, I just acted like nothing had happened. When our uncle pinched my cheek again, played with my hair, laughed with me, I just smiled like everything was normal. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Emma, nor did I tell her parents. Part of me was scared to say it out loud. Another part was terrified that my parents would never let me sleep out again. And a third part was afraid that my dad might actually want to go fight the guy. I never ended up staying another night at Emma's house again. Not even after her uncle finally went back to the States. Looking back now with adult eyes, it chills me just how close I may have come to something terrible. So to Emma's creepy, too smooth, middle-of-the-night pictures uncle, let's never meet again. I've used a translator for this story because English isn't my first language, so I hope this comes across okay. The story still creeps me out every time I think about it, so I wanted to share it with others. This happened to me about a year ago, and I still find myself replaying it just about every night. At the time, I, a female and 25, was visiting some friends. It was the middle of the week, but I was on vacation, so I stayed out late. I think I left my friends at around 1:30 that night. I got in my car to head home, which is about a 30-minute drive away. I live in a small German town, on a main street, but it's not very big. At night during the week, there's hardly any traffic. Maybe 1 or 2 cars every few minutes. And then that's it. Whole lot of darkness. A bit of context that might help to understand. Coming from the direction that I drove in, you can see down the road for quite a while, maybe 600, 700 meters. For my American friends, I think that's around 2,000 feet. I rent a parking spot in an underground garage, shared with 10 other tenants. The garage entrance is tucked away beside the building and somewhat hidden by the surrounding houses. It isn't really visible unless you're standing right in front of it, or you know where it's at. So I was driving home, typical spring night. Everything in my mind was normal. I pulled into the driveway, stopped for a moment to open the garage door with my remote. Then I backed into my parking spot, which faces the entrance. I left my engine running as I rummaged in the center console. I think I was looking for a charger or a lighter. Can't exactly recall. When suddenly I looked up, and there was a stranger standing in front of my car. It was a man, maybe 40, 45 years old, no more than 10 feet in front of my car, inside of the garage, and he was just staring at me. I was instantly terrified, not just because I hadn't ever seen this man before, but because the only way that he would have made it in is by walking into the garage on foot between the time my car went in and the garage door closed. Reflexively, I hit the lock button on my car, which I know I should have done the moment I got into my car. He shouted that I should give him my phone, saying that his car had broken down and he needed to make a call. But after driving the road that I was just on, I hadn't seen any broken down car or any flashing hazard lights anywhere on the road. There was clearly no car pulled over. I was a bit frozen in shock, so I just stared back at him. He seemed to notice just how confused I was. He added that the breakdown happened the next town over, which, by the way, is about an hour's walk. So again, I'm internally calling bullshit. He told me once more to give him my phone, this time becoming louder and more aggressive with the request. That's when I realized what he wasn't wearing. This man was shirtless, wearing just knee-length checkered shorts. It wasn't exactly freezing outside, but it definitely wasn't warm enough to be standing around half naked. I yelled through my closed window that I couldn't help him, and I asked him to leave. He, now more angry, said, "You don't need to be afraid of me. Just come out and give me your phone. I told him that I was sorry, but no, and that he needed to leave. He stared at me for a moment longer, then angrily walked out of the garage, this time through the pedestrian exit. I stayed in my car until that door was fully closed, and only then did I turn off the engine. I wanted to call a friend, but there's no reception in that garage, so I grabbed my keys along with every bit of courage I had and sprinted to the opposite door leading into the apartment hallway. It's a heavy door that sometimes jams, but thankfully not that night. There's also another back entrance from outside into the garage, and I had no idea if that door was locked or if that man knew about it. Once inside the building, I ran to my ground floor apartment. The windows are somewhat shielded by a hedge leading to my terrace, but technically it's still reachable from the street. Once inside, I locked everything, shut all the blinds, and just sat there in the dark for several minutes before calling that friend. I debated calling the police, but I ultimately didn't, thinking they had more urgent matters to deal with since actually the man hadn't done anything to me. Looking back now, though, I realized that was a mistake. But I think you could tell that I was completely rattled. I know now that I was likely not the first person or the last person that this man ran that game with. But the fact that he might have gotten someone else to get out of their car and then done something to them, that freaks me out to no end. I'm usually someone who's happy to help people, but he could have asked me to call someone from outside or knock on a door somewhere. Anything other than following a young woman into a garage at night, half naked, mind you. That's just no. I haven't seen him again, thankfully, but since that night, I absolutely hate parking there. I don't get out of my car until the garage door is fully closed, and even then, I still find myself on edge. I'm grateful that I kept the car running and locked the doors. I'm thankful that my parking spot is right across from the entrance, so I have a clear view. I'm also thankful that the door didn't stick that night. But if we're counting thanks, the real one is that I didn't absent-mindedly get out of my car earlier that night. I really don't want to imagine what could have happened if I had. I don't know if this constitutes a creepy story so much as just a really weird one, but I'll leave it up to you to make that decision. A few months back, I made an unremarkable post on the Symbology subreddit, asking about the meaning of the symbol on a necklace that I found. When it seemed like most of the people didn't know what it meant, someone called Stan asked to DM me. It was either Reddit or the mods of the Symbology subreddit that hid the comment from the post, because it was really hard for me to find. But the guy had a simple username, so I searched it and found him. This seems really stupid looking back on it, but I didn't find anything suspicious about him at first, and I just wanted anything resembling an answer as to what the symbol on the necklace was. He launched into a bizarre story about how the necklace was an elder sign, and there were only 5 of them ever made, but one of the 5 owners passed away. It sounded like he was making it up, but I indulged him and asked him about this crazy story. And while he was happy to go on and on about it, I really didn't think much of it. I then made another post about a month later to the RBI board, asking about a set of missing persons cases that I remembered from when I was younger, asking if anyone knew about them. It was completely unrelated to anything that I've ever posted before, but Stan sent me a message about it, saying that I should delete the post because it was about an ongoing investigation. He said I should delete the post about the necklace too. All of this seems super odd to me since this just happened to be someone who responded to a previous post of mine. I asked him to send me some kind of proof that he was actually someone with authority on this, but all he did was continue to urge me to delete the posts, getting more and more aggressive about it. I then ignored him, thinking that whoever this was, he just wanted attention, and then I just went on about my life. For work, I'm a cashier at a convenience store, and a few weeks after I stopped messaging Stan, 2 men were buying 2 frozen pizzas. They both looked to be in their early to mid-20s. One with blonde hair, one with black hair. Nothing suspicious about that on its face, until the blonde one referred to me by my Reddit handle, asking if anyone ever told me what the necklace meant. I was absolutely stunned, and I don't think my face did anything to conceal that. While my Reddit handle is a first name, it's not my actual first name. It's just been my username on everything since I was a kid, although no one has ever used that name on me in real life. I realized then that one of them must have been Stan. I just pretended to not know what he was talking about, and he went on to say, "Never mind," before paying for his pizzas, and the two guys just left. This concerned me though, because I'm not exactly sure how he found me. As I was walking home that night, I saw the two of them in a car, driving on the road running parallel to me, and both of them seemed to give me this brief stare. I'll stop short of calling it a death stare, but it certainly didn't feel welcoming. I still didn't know which one of them was Stan, until I saw one of them again. I assumed that it was the blonde one since he was the one who spoke to me, but I actually never saw that guy again. I did see the black-haired one again several times, always standing or walking next to someone else, but it was a different companion each and every time. In all of these initial sightings, Stan wouldn't talk to me. He'd just make the same stare though, usually speaking with whoever he was with. But after 5 or 6 times, he finally walked up to me and spoke for the first time, asking me if I took down any of the Reddit posts. Again, I feigned ignorance, but this time, he just kept pushing. I finally said, "Dude, leave me alone already," before turning and walking off. I hadn't called the police yet because Stan didn't intimidate me that much. While he stared, he never exactly seemed hostile. But one day on the way home from the laundromat, I found myself a little concerned when I saw the same car behind me for the entire drive home. I got really paranoid when I realized that it looked a lot like Stan's car, which I had only seen once, that first night heading home from the convenience store. I made 3 left turns, but he seemed to catch on to the fact that I knew he was there, and eventually turned right. When I made it around the block and got back home, Stan was parked right in front of the apartment complex, now standing outside of the car as he looked directly at me. I rolled up my windows, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. That's when he walked up to the car and started knocking on my window. The police showed up and spoke with him. I don't know exactly what he told them, but they didn't really do much. They asked if I had any proof of him stalking me before. I showed them both his comments and direct messages, but they seemed far from interested. He told them that he'd go home and not talk to me, and they seemed satisfied with that reasoning. Thankfully, I haven't seen him again since that night, but every so often, I'll get odd DMs in my Reddit inbox asking me why I won't delete the posts in question. I delete and block them each time, but that doesn't stop the exact same messages from filtering in every few weeks from a different new user. Overall, I just find this whole thing strange. Like, what's the end game here? Why does this person care so much? Aren't there more interesting things in this world than this necklace that I asked one question about? Stan, because I don't doubt that you'll see this, I swear to you, I'm not that intriguing of a person. Just let it go. When I was 18, all I cared about was getting out of my parents' house and finding a place, any place to live so that I could start in university. Where I'm from, the housing shortage is no joke. Students basically scramble every year praying that something opens up. So rather than going all the typical routes that I know thousands of other people would go, I took my search to Facebook, hoping that luck would be on my side. Eventually, a man from Egypt messaged me, said that he had a private room available. This man had no profile picture, no real info, just a name. And normally for me that would have been a red flag, but when you're desperate for housing, you tend to ignore things that you shouldn't. He told me that he'd just moved back to Egypt because he was sick and was renting his 3-bedroom home to students. He gave me the address and said his son would show me around. The son actually did show up. Young guy, maybe late 20s. Totally normal, but barely talked. He walked me through the place, gave me the keys later on by mail. This would be a standard shared house, 3 bedrooms, shared kitchen, and a bathroom. Everything looked clean. Nothing really strange about it. I asked the current tenants why there was a room open. They exchanged a look and said, "Our landlord's a bit of a weird guy." They didn't attach any horror stories to it, so it was nothing specific. And yet again, I really needed a place. So I brushed it off, thinking that however weird this guy was, it couldn't be that bad. I then signed the contract through email and moved right in. Once the landlord got my phone number, instead of having to communicate through Facebook, everything sort of shifted. He'd message me daily, sometimes up to 10 times a day, always asking why I wasn't picking up his calls, telling me that he was lonely, saying that he wanted to build a friendship with me. I did my best to keep it polite but distant, as this wasn't something that I was searching for. I was busy with school, and honestly, this sort of thing felt inappropriate. I did my best to just ignore most of it and go on with my life. But about a month in, the messages stopped being desperate and started being specific. Things like, "I notice you have a heater and an air fryer on your table. Please don't use those." Or, "Why do you own 2 laptops? That's strange, isn't it?" That's when it hit me. How does a man who supposedly lived thousands of miles away in Egypt know what's sitting on a table inside my locked bedroom? My windows were shut. I kept my door locked, and I'd never once seen him in person after signing the contract. Yet he somehow knew, accurately, what was in my private room. He then tried charging me 150 extra euros on top of our agreed-upon rent for using my air fryer too much. Again, how would he even know I was using it at all, let alone inside my room? None of my roommates ever saw my air fryer. It's not like it was in our kitchen, and I never brought it out. Speaking of my roommates, 3 students, all pretty normal. When I finally told them what the landlord was messaging me, they looked genuinely confused. I don't know exactly why I did this, but I was searching for any answer that I could. I asked them to show me their WhatsApp chats with him. Nothing but the occasional rent paid receipts. Not one message from him to them about their belongings. Not a single creepy text. Apparently those were only destined for me. I even checked if their keys could unlock my room. They couldn't. And for the most part, all of my roommates were gone during the day. So either they were absolute Oscar-level actors, or someone else was watching me. That thought bothered me so much that I started deliberately placing random objects on my table, things I'd never normally keep there, just to test him. And sure enough, landlord noticed. He noticed every single time. That was the moment I nearly had a panic attack right in the middle of a lecture hall. I didn't respond to any of his comments after that. I was done engaging with this man. I just needed to figure out how to get out of this lease. 2 days later, my phone started blowing up with calls from numbers that I didn't recognize. When I had finally had enough, I answered one. It was his voice, low, calm, and unmistakable. "Come home." That's all that was said. When I left school that night and got back to the house, the trash I had thrown out earlier that morning, my trash, nobody else's, was scattered all over the floor right in front of my bedroom door, almost as if someone had taken the bag, ripped it open, and dumped everything out. At that point, I went from weirded out to scared. I was genuinely convinced that something was deeply wrong. Either this man was inside the house somehow, or someone was watching me for him. I couldn't break the lease. I ended up sticking this out for almost a year because finding housing was that hard. But eventually, I found a different place to move. And as soon as I did, I filed for a restraining order against him. I still have no explanation for how he knew what objects were in my room, how he knew when I used my air fryer, or how the trash ended up outside my door. My friends had their own theories, hidden cameras or a roommate spying on me. But those were my first thoughts too. I looked everywhere up and down in that room for cameras, outlets, vents, everywhere. And it's not a large room with that many hiding places. I never found a thing. I suppose it could have been a roommate. Maybe that's the most likely explanation. but it doesn't explain knowing what's on my desk at all hours when I never invited any of my roommates into my room. To this day, I have no real answer. Just this overwhelming feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching me far more closely than I would have liked.